Chapter 580. Oh God, what have I done? Looking at the classroom with so many casualties, Elizabeth sank into an intense state of panic and fear. She couldn't believe that her witch blood would awaken in such a bloody way at this time, and she didn't know how to deal with the aftermath. After all, this was Horseman High School, one of the top 5 private schools in the United States. Anyone who could study here was either rich or respectable. Now that more than 20 people had died, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. She might even be arrested by the police and imprisoned for the rest of her life. The girl couldn't help but shudder at the thought of spending the rest of her young life in a terrifying prison. She grabbed her bag and ran out of the campus. As she ran, she muttered to herself, "It's not my fault. It's their fault. Who told these bitches to provoke me first? They deserve to die. Run. Run for your life." The tragic scene of killing one of her own kind for the first time made Elizabeth completely panic. She forgot that she was also a part of the underground world, and even had a boyfriend who held great power. When she slowly calmed down, she didn't know how far she had run. Her whole body was trembling. Through the glass window beside the road, she could clearly see the purple light in her pupils and the strange pattern that extended from her forehead to her cheeks. Damn it, I've awakened. I'm now a real witch. This girl who had read some books about witches finally realized what had happened to her body. A trace of joy appeared on her panicked face. But soon, this joy was washed away by the cruel reality, because she saw a few policemen coming out of the car, holding her picture and questioning passersby. She didn't need to ask to know that these policemen obviously knew about the tragedy that happened in the school, and were looking for the whereabouts of the criminal suspect. She couldn't be caught. Elizabeth bit her lower lip subconsciously and quickly took off her school uniform, skirt, and leather shoes. She then bought an inconspicuous casual outfit from a cheap $1 store and changed into it. She then covered her face and hair with a baseball cap. After doing all this, she took a deep breath and went back to the street. Using the stealing skills she learned from the gangsters, she skillfully stole an old pickup truck parked on the side of the road and drove to Catherine's Kiss restaurant. As a girl who had been baptized by countless Hollywood movies, she undoubtedly knew that she couldn't make a phone call at this time. She threw her phone in the trash to prevent it from being tracked. The only thing she could do now was to find her good sister. Perhaps in her subconscious mind, Aisha was the only family member who would never betray her. With a restless heart, Elizabeth quickly arrived at the secret bar in the basement of the restaurant. However, she was not in a hurry to contact her sisters. Instead, she lowered her head and casually ordered a cocktail. Then, she put a $10 bill full of tiny words under the glass, turned around, and disappeared into the dim passage. "Hey, Nita, help me look after the bar. I'm going to the bathroom." When Aisha received the money, she quickly found the trick on the back of the bill. She also recognized Elizabeth's handwriting. She immediately shouted at the new young witch and quickly ran into the dark passage. About 2 or 3 minutes later, she saw a familiar figure hiding in the corner. Without any hesitation, she immediately stepped forward and hugged her sister who had no blood relationship with her. "Damn it, tell me what's going on. Why did you contact me in such a sneaky way?" "I'm sorry, Aisha. I awakened." Elizabeth slowly took off her hat, revealing her amazing purple pupils and the powerful magic patterns on her face. "My God, you're so beautiful. You're really a lucky guy that makes people jealous," Aisha exclaimed as she carefully stroked the slightly cold lines on the back of his neck. Elizabeth shook her head with a bitter smile. "No, I think it's more like a disaster. When I awakened, I lost control. You can't imagine the scene at that time. All the glass in the school building shattered, and the explosion destroyed classroom. At least 12 students died in an instant, and many more people fell to the ground with serious injuries. The New York police are investigating, and I'm afraid I'm already on the wanted list." Gulp. When Aisha heard the news, she subconsciously swallowed her saliva and asked with a slightly trembling voice, "You killed 12 people? And they were all students of Horseman High School? What about Zhang? Have you contacted him?" "Zhang has been missing for almost 2 weeks since the auction of the cruise ship ended. I called Jessie, and she said that this is normal. Zhang will come back on his own soon, Elizabeth replied helplessly. Okay, it seems we can't count on your powerful boyfriend. Wait here and don't go anywhere. I'll contact the cleaners and see if they can find a way to suppress this matter. As the temporary caretaker of a territory, Aisha was no longer a newbie who knew nothing. She understood the importance of sealing the news as soon as possible. Once this supernatural outbreak became a hot topic, Elizabeth's identity would be exposed, and the whole thing would become very troublesome. It was one thing to erase and modify the memories of 3 to 5 people, but it was another thing to modify the memories of thousands of people. If the situation got out of control, according to the normal procedure of the Parliament, they would usually sacrifice the perpetrator and then use public opinion to portray it as a completely normal case. After watching her sister disappear at the end of the passage, Elizabeth, who had been on tenterhooks all the way, finally breathed a sigh of relief. She muttered to herself in a voice that only she could hear, "Dear, where are you? I need your help and protection now." The girl had no idea that Zhang Cheng was standing in the center of a complicated teleportation circle, carefully checking every magic symbol to make sure there were no mistakes. In fact, this magic circle incorporated too many technologies. It had far surpassed any long-distance teleportation spell, including the 2 high magic worlds of Faerun and Azeroth. Not only was it more accurate and more concealed, but it was also able to break through many powerful magic defenses. Other than anti-magic fields and large-scale anti-magic fields, there was nothing that could stop the instant space folding effect. After admiring the masterpiece that he had built with his own hands for a while, Zhang Cheng nodded with satisfaction. Very good. Let's hope it has the expected effect. Otherwise, I'll have to kill the army under the control of the Supreme Council. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately activated the entire magic circle. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling white light lit up the bedroom at the highest point of the castle. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful Book Mobile Version Website.com. Chapter 581. With a strong sense of dizziness, Zhang Cheng finally squeezed through the magic defense left from the ancient times and jumped out of a gap in the sky above New York. The next second, bang! The energy gushing out of the gap instantly caused a destructive impact on everything within a radius of dozens of meters. Glasses, bottles, barrels, chairs, tables, and chandeliers were all shattered under the release of the horrifying energy. Of course, he himself wasn't any better. He crashed into a wall and then fell to the ground. Fortunately, he had cast enough protective spells in advance. Otherwise, his neck and spine would have been broken. Damn it, the rebound caused by the magic defense is really strong. Zhang Cheng cursed in a low voice as he struggled to get up and looked around. He found that the place where he landed was actually a bar. Fortunately, it was morning and the bar wasn't open yet. So, there wasn't even a single person there. Otherwise, a dozen unlucky people would have died. Without any hesitation, he took a small bartender's suit from behind the bar, changed out of the nondescript robe he was wearing, and quickly left this devastated place. There was no doubt that although this stowaway was very successful, he was squeezed and rebounded by the powerful protective spell, resulting in a serious loss of distance control. Not only did he not accurately teleport to the original destination, but he was also thrown out halfway. What was more terrifying was that this violent magic shock would undoubtedly attract the attention of the Supreme Council. Zhang Cheng didn't want others to know about his ambitious plan to build an army at all. He quickly launched a series of teleportation spells and completely disrupted the space fissures in this area. No matter who woke up, they wouldn't be able to find any useful information. After all this was done, he controlled a taxi driver with his psionic power and asked him to drive him back to his villa in Long Island. Before he left, he also erased his memory. In fact, it turned out that it was right to be cautious. As soon as he took a shower and changed his clothes, the ring on his finger that symbolized his identity as a member of the Supreme Council suddenly emitted a faint light. Then, a piece of parchment appeared out of thin air and floated in the air. It read, "Dear Mr. Senator, at 10:25 a.m. a teleportation connection point from hell in Queens, New York, was discovered. It is suspected that demons have invaded. Please investigate and expel them as soon as possible. Node Monitoring Center of the North American Supreme Council. Node Monitoring Center? The Parliament has such an organization? Zhang Cheng rubbed his chin and murmured to himself. However, before he could even touch the note, the parchment began to burn. In just 2 to 3 seconds, it disappeared without a trace, leaving not even a speck of dust behind. In order to fool others, he had to pick up the phone and pretend to call the Queen's administrator. About half a minute later, Venus's mature and sexy voice came from the other end of the phone. "Good morning. Why are you in the mood to call me today? Could it be a troublesome matter?" Just now, the Node Monitoring Center sent a notification telling me that there might be a stowaway from hell in your territory. Go and investigate. If it's a demon, kill it or expel it. Zhang Cheng interrupted the other party's speculation and gave a straightforward answer. Devil? Damn it. Send me the address. Venus became nervous when she heard the news. There was no way she wouldn't be nervous. One had to know that demons from hell had all kinds of strange personalities. It would be fine if they met those who liked to hide in the dark and scheme. However, if they met those who were extremely crazy, cruel, bloodthirsty, and didn't care about the consequences, it would be a complete disaster. They wouldn't care about the agreement. In just a week or two, they could bewitch a large number of ordinary people into a fanatical state and then commit suicide to offer their souls. In the densely populated New York, if it wasn't handled well, it would turn into an explosive news story. Don't panic. I'll send you the address immediately. Go take a look first. Also, what did you want to say to me just now? As the instigator of the whole thing, Zhang Cheng clearly knew that there was no demon, so he took the initiative to change the topic. Don't you know? Venus's tone revealed a hint of surprise. Know what? I went out a few days ago and just came back. Did something happen when I wasn't around? Zhang Cheng subconsciously frowned. No, actually it can't be considered an accident. However, the aftermath has already begun to ferment. You'd better come out and deal with it quickly. Otherwise, I'm afraid that your young and cute girlfriend will be in big trouble. Venus hinted meaningfully. Elizabeth. Zhang Cheng keenly sensed something and immediately hung up the phone to dial the girl's number. After a dozen or so rings, no one answered. Something happened. After he reacted, he immediately called one of his most trusted subordinates in New York, Urban Best. After a while, this battle maniac, who was a little bloodthirsty in his bones, finally pressed the answer button and asked in a panting voice, "Boss, who do you need me to kill?" Needless to say, he must have just completed a very intense battle training. No, it's not killing. Tell me, what happened to Elizabeth? Why can't I get through to her phone? As far as I know, when she awakened her witch blood, she seemed to have caused a lot of trouble. Right now, she's hiding from the police in the underground bar of Catherine's Kiss restaurant. Urban Best replied concisely. Awakened? The police are chasing her? What about the cleaners? Could it be that no one is helping her deal with the aftermath? Zhang Cheng's tone revealed a trace of sternness. No. To be exact, according to the rules, Elizabeth hasn't registered with any of the lords, so no one has the right to protect her. Even more so, we can't rashly use the resources of the underground world to interfere with the law enforcement agencies. The only thing we can do is to chase away those with bad intentions. We can't do anything about the world of ordinary people. Of course, if it's your order, then it's a different matter. Urban Best explained rather helplessly. In order to ensure that the underground world wouldn't be exposed to the public, the Parliament set up all kinds of strange rules. Many times, even the lords had to abide by them. I hate these rigid rules. Call everyone and inform them. Settle this matter within 6 hours. Remember, don't leave any evidence behind. If necessary, I allow you to silence them. As the last word fell, Zhang Cheng directly hung up the phone and drove his fastest sports car. He crossed the road at an extremely fast speed and drove towards the direction of Catherine's Kiss restaurant. He was prepared to comfort the frightened girl. In a way, Elizabeth was the last shred of desire he had as a mortal to cling on to. If even this was lost, then his entire person would undergo an unpredictable change from his thoughts and soul. He might even evolve in a direction that he didn't want. He would completely abandon his emotions and do things with absolute rationality or absolute madness. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile reading website. Chapter 582. As one of the 13 people standing at the top of the pyramid power structure in North America's underground world, Zhang Cheng's orders would undoubtedly be carried out with the highest priority. Especially in New York, which was under his jurisdiction, even the most rebellious counselors and lords would obey him obediently to avoid being caught and used as a tool to establish their authority. In less than an hour, the 24-hour news on TV about the Horseman High School tragedy had undergone a drastic change. From a suspected supernatural phenomenon that was very close to the truth, it gradually became a terrorist attack, and even a bearded man from the Middle East who claimed to be responsible for the incident was arrested. For a time, the direction of the news quickly changed from fantasy to reality. In the end, there were experts who jumped out and said that the bodies that were squashed by magic energy were actually due to the impact of the shock wave produced by the explosion of the high explosives. Due to the huge impact of the 9/11 incident on the entire American society, many people began to shout for the murderer to be severely punished and for more funds and efforts to combat international terrorism. Elizabeth, who was wanted not long ago, became invisible in the blink of an eye, as if everyone had selectively forgotten this high school girl who was regarded as an important suspect. However, just as the uproar caused by the ordinary people gradually subsided, another poisonous snake that had been hiding in the dark for a long time finally couldn't help but open its mouth full of poisonous fangs. This guy was none other than Brenda, whose arm was cut off by Zhang Cheng not long ago. Of course, he was not stupid enough to fight alone. Instead, he pulled together almost all the vampire families living in seclusion in New York and planned to make a move on Elizabeth. To be precise, he was going to use cruel blood magic to inject a seed of death into the girl's body. Then, when the young man and woman had intimate relations, he would directly detonate the seed, causing the blood to gush out uncontrollably. Finally, the last drop of blood in the body would flow out, and she would die. As for why the vampire families were willing to take such a huge risk to get involved in this kind of thing, on the one hand, it was for revenge, and on the other hand, it was to have a better life in the future. After all, during the purge in Brooklyn, there were at least 40 vampire nobles who took advantage of the chaos to unscrupulously suck human blood. They were captured by Zhang Cheng and tortured by sunlight. The cruelty of his methods directly angered the few high and mighty dukes. They couldn't imagine how difficult their lives would be if such a person ruled the entire state of New York. In a few years, their family would be weakened and destroyed. One had to know that the vampires in this world couldn't obtain the energy they needed to survive by sucking animals or blood bags. On the contrary, they had to directly absorb the blood-rich in life energy from the living to transform it into the nutrients they needed. This also meant that the blood was only a tool to carry energy. What was more important was the life energy obtained during the absorption process. Vampires had to constantly attack and trick ordinary people to ensure that the entire vampire family could continue to exist. However, Zhang Cheng's iron-blooded policy of killing anyone who caused trouble had undoubtedly caused the risk of hunting ordinary people to skyrocket. Therefore, the two sides hit it off and set up this fatal trap. Standing in the passageway of the underground bar of Catherine's Kiss restaurant, Brenda stared at the clueless Elizabeth with her blood-red eyes. She pursed her lips and said to another vampire who looked to be in his early 20s, "Duke Colvin, did you see that? I've inserted the seed of death into the girl's heart. It won't be long before that damn Easterner pays for her arrogance and ignorance. Blood and death. Oomph. I hope so. Remember, if the plan doesn't succeed, don't hesitate. Immediately leave New York, North America, and go to Africa or East Asia. The Council must not be aware of our cooperation. I believe that with your intelligence, you should know the terrible consequences of assassinating a master alchemist and a member of the Supreme Council." The vampire called Duke Cole then threatened in a low voice. Although he looked very young, he was actually more than 400 years old. He was the oldest and most powerful vampire in North America. Even in Europe, where vampires were born, he was considered an old monster. Above him, there were only a few terrifying monsters who had resurrected from the dead many times and could be related to the origin of vampires. Don't worry. No matter what happens, I won't tell anyone about you and your family. Brenda gave a promise with a gloomy face. He was not a fool. Naturally, he understood the hint of the famous Blood Duke beside him. Although vampires, werewolves, and other special magic life forms were also a part of the underground world, whether it was the Supreme Council or the Wizard Association, the main forces were composed of humans. Even a mixed blood had to maintain at least half of the human bloodline. Otherwise, they would not be able to reach the core of power. Therefore, once a vampire participated in the murder of a member of the Supreme Council and a master alchemist, no matter how powerful the family behind him was, he would be mercilessly wiped out. In history, such things had happened many times. In the face of the overwhelming power of humans, especially human wizards, witches, and other spellcasters, the seemingly powerful vampire family was no different from ordinary people. Not to mention joining forces to resist, they would be cruelly and bloodily suppressed as soon as there was the slightest sign of rebellion. If he was not forced into a corner, Cole then would not have chosen to take the risk. Just as the Vampire Duke was about to say something, he suddenly felt a huge amount of magic approaching. He immediately pulled Brenda up and turned into a bloody mist, carefully floating on the ceiling. After a dozen or so seconds, Zhang Cheng, who was wearing a casual suit, walked into the bar from the other side. He opened his arms and hugged Elizabeth, who was walking up to him, and then kissed each other passionately. Ahem, I say, can you two restrain yourselves? Aisha deliberately coughed twice. Otherwise, there would be some restricted scenes in the middle of the bar. Hey, my dear good sister, will you not spoil our merriment? Gasped Elizabeth, turning up her eyes. Sorry, if you want to do some exercise that is good for your body and mind, you can go to the car or the back room. But please don't do it on my bar. I don't want the place where I work to emit some strange pungent smell. Aisha retorted mercilessly. Seeing the close sisters start to bicker again, Zhang Cheng could not help but smile and shake his head. He said, about the trouble of the awakening of the witch bloodline, I have already settled it. You don't have to worry about being wanted by the law enforcement department. But for safety's sake, don't go to Horseman High School anymore. Settled? So fast. Elizabeth widened her eyes in surprise. She saw with her own eyes how many phone calls Aisha had made. In the end, not only did the situation not get better, but it was also rapidly deteriorating. What do you think? I am one of the few people who have the most power on this continent. Next time, remember, if you encounter a similar situation, don't panic and don't run around. Go straight to my base. There, no one will dare to do anything to you, even if the other party is the President of the United States. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 583. Aha, it feels so good to be home. Elizabeth kicked off her cheap sneakers without a care for her image the moment she stepped into the living room of the villa. She collapsed onto the sofa with a look of enjoyment on her face. After all, the events of the morning were too exciting for a young girl who had yet to reach the age of 17. However, she had only laid down for a few seconds when the hellhound Gazami, who had been in charge of guarding the house, came over and sniffed around. She couldn't help but scream, "Darling, take care of your dog. Heavens, it's licking me." One had to know that Gazami was not one of those furry and adorable pets. Instead, it was a huge monster. Not only did it have a mouth full of sharp teeth and sinister bone spikes, but its body was also covered in red scales. There were also 2 magic feelers that stood tall on its back. Even a grown man would be scared to the point of wetting himself, much less a girl. Of course, Elizabeth knew very well that this strange magical creature wouldn't actually harm her, so she didn't do anything drastic. She only kicked it a few times, trying to get it to move further away. "Gazami, what are you doing?" Zhang Cheng, who was changing his clothes, immediately scolded when he saw this scene. He didn't quite understand why the hellhound was circling around his girlfriend like it was having a stroke. Could it be because of the awakening of the witch's bloodline? No matter what, these magical creatures from the Burning Legion instinctively had a strong urge to devour anything related to magic. Asterisk Kacha. Kacha. Asterisk Gazami turned around and made a grinding sound. The two magic feelers flickered with a crimson light, as if trying to express something. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly noticed this. He immediately threw away the clothes in his hands and walked up to his girlfriend with his upper body naked. He extended his right index finger and gently brushed it across his girlfriend's head, slowly extending downwards. "What are you doing?" Elizabeth blinked her eyes inexplicably. "Don't move. Take off all your clothes." Zhang Cheng ordered with a strange expression. "Take off my clothes? Now. Oh my God. Don't tell me you're thinking of." The girl was obviously getting the wrong idea. She bit her lips and put on a seductive posture. "No, my dear, it's like there's something dangerous in your body. Do you know? Zamir is no ordinary pet. It has an unparalleled ability to sense magic. It can easily detect whether a person has a curse or other harmful magic." As Zhang Cheng explained, he took off his girlfriend's blouse and skirt one by one, even her socks. "You mean I've been cursed by someone?" Elizabeth, who was naked, glanced at the hellhound with a curious look on her face. "I can't be sure for now. I need to do a full body check on you." After saying that, Zhang Cheng took out an ancient-looking monocle and put on. He stuck it close to the other party's fair skin and carefully observed, occasionally pressing it with his hands. This was especially so for some particularly sensitive areas. Every time he pressed, the girl's breathing would become rapid, and she would gradually enter a state of estrus. She kept stroking her boyfriend's hair and neck, which was quite a hindrance to the examination. After all, Zhang Cheng was not a priest or a paladin. He was not particularly professional in this area. Moreover, the famous wishing spell in the Pharaon continent was not effective in this world. Therefore, he could only rely on the constant detection magic on the monocle and use the arcane light to determine whether there was anything unclean hidden. In fact, most of the time, when curses and negative magic were not activated or were in the incubation period, even high-level priests would find it difficult to detect. Just as Elizabeth was about to completely lose her mind and pounce on him, he suddenly found that there seemed to be an inconspicuous black spot in his girlfriend's rapidly beating heart. In order to confirm that this was not an illusion, he immediately pressed Elizabeth under his body and whispered a shaky spell. In the blink of an eye, the black dot began to grow bigger and bigger. At the same time, the girl's originally fair skin was covered with a layer of pink, as if the blood in her body was boiling. A seed of blood and death. After realizing what this thing was, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a terrifying rage and murderous intent. It was obvious that if Zamir had not detected the abnormality in advance, once his little brother entered Elizabeth's body, this seed would have instantly ignited the blood in their bodies, causing it to spurt out completely uncontrollably. Perhaps for him, who had divinity, it would not be enough to kill him, but Elizabeth would definitely not be able to escape death. There was no hesitation. He directly used his psionic ability to carefully remove this vicious little thing from her heart. He sneered and muttered to himself, "No matter who it is, you will pay the price for this." Damn it, what happened just now? As the seed was removed, Elizabeth quickly regained her composure and shuddered. There was no need to ask to know that it was this thing that had made her so sensitive just now. Nothing, a stinking bug hiding in the dark who wants to plot against us. I will soon find him and crush him to death. Now let me feed you this little wildcat in heat. Zhang Xing obviously did not intend to let her know about this, and took the initiative to block her mouth with a kiss. At the same time, his hands moved up and down, and in a short while, the sound of intense collisions between a man and a woman could be heard in the hall. At the same time, in the vampire's underground base on the other side of New York, Cole then was sitting on a chair, patiently staring at a black heart that was beating continuously. After a full 2 or 3 minutes, he turned around and asked Brenda, "It's been 2 hours. Why is there still no reaction? Be patient. My dear Duke, you have to understand that we are not dealing with an ordinary person. That guy has extraordinary vigilance and self-control and will not be easily controlled by desire. The latter replied unhurriedly, No, we can't keep waiting like this. We have to send an informant to confirm what he is doing now. No, we absolutely can't send anyone. Don't you understand? He is a powerful magus. Vampires with insufficient strength will be discovered as soon as they approach. We can't take the risk. But just when this vampire duke wanted to say something, the black heart suddenly exploded with a bang without any warning. Minced meat and blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the table and the floor red on the spot. Seeing this scene, Brenda immediately stood up and shouted in ecstasy, Success! The seed has been detonated. Ha ha ha! Don't be happy too early. We have to go there immediately in person to make sure that he will never appear again. Cole then clenched his fist tightly and gave a look to his most outstanding descendants beside him. About a few minutes later, 3 helicopters rose into the air and flew straight towards Chongdao. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful book mobile version website.com. Chapter 584. Hatred. It was always the greatest motivation for a person to move forward. When a helicopter landed on the lawn of the villa, Brenda was the first to rush out, wanting to see the tragic death of her enemy with her own eyes. The vampires, whose bodies were wrapped in black, glowing material, followed closely behind. Although in many legends, vampires were stubborn and old-fashioned, the vampires of this world were definitely representatives of the times. Not only were they the first to try to replace traditional cold weapons with firearms, but they also actively invested in scientific research. These fabrics that could almost completely isolate sunlight, ultraviolet rays, and other fatal things to vampires were the best proof. But when these fully armed guys knocked open the door and entered the living room, everyone was stunned, because they did not see the bloody scene that they expected, but only saw a young man sitting on the sofa, mocking them with a playful tone. Ah, you're finally here. I really didn't expect that, my dear Senator Brenda. You actually have the guts to appear in front of me. You're not dead. Brenda's pupils shrank and dilated violently, disbelief appearing on her face. One had to know that the seed of death was an extremely powerful and evil magic. No flesh and blood could withstand its unparalleled power. Dead? No, of course not. Your insidious little trick did not fool my pet. Zamir, come out and meet our guests. Zhang Chung waved at the hellhound in the dark corner. Zamir, who had received his master's order, immediately jumped out and blocked the door. A vampire had just raised his gun, but before he could shoot, he was directly pushed to the ground by Zamir, and his heart was torn apart alive. The whole process did not even take a second. Looking at the mangled corpse on the ground, Zhang Chung smiled and shrugged his shoulders. Sorry, I forgot to remind you, my pet's temper is a little irritable, so you'd better not anger it, and don't think that you can escape. I guarantee that no matter where you escape to, its sensitive nose will be able to smell the magic energy emitted from your body. Honorable Senator, I think I can explain. Cole then sensed that the plan had failed and immediately tried to remove himself from the conspiracy. Explain? Explain how you work together to plant a seed of blood and death in my girlfriend's heart? Explain why you want to kill me? No, there's no need to explain. Duke, I don't even want to know your motive. Because each and every one of you will pay the price. It won't be long before there won't be a single living vampire in New York, including your beloved great-granddaughter, who will welcome the beautiful sunrise tomorrow morning. Although Zhang Chung kept a smile on his face as he spoke, the threat of death in his tone caused the temperature in the villa to drop to freezing point. You want to start a war with the Blood Clan? The vampire duke's expression changed instantly. Zhang Chung smirked and shook his head in disdain. No, it's not a war. It's a massacre. You and your descendants will spend the last days of your life being hunted down endlessly. But before that, Urban, Jesse, Bram, help me clean up this eyesore. Remember to leave the Duke behind. He'll make a good test subject. As you wish. Boss, a vampire Duke? Good prey. Let's hope they like the taste of the dark flames. Amidst the light-hearted banter, The three who had been promoted from knights to lords quickly rushed out from behind the bookshelves and launched an attack on the enemy. Before the vampires with automatic firearms could pull the trigger, they were instantly engulfed by the evil fire that could burn the soul. They screamed in agony. Art, no, no, no. No one could bear the pain of the soul being burned. In just a dozen seconds, these vampires turned into gray dust and scattered with the wind. Not even their ashes were left intact. As the first life form in the world to be transformed by dark energy, Bram Karis, who had the bloodline of hell, could no longer be considered a human. He was a special individual who was a combination of a warlock and a demon hunter. Not only could he release evil flames, absorb life force, magical energy, extract souls, and so on, he could also freely switch between his human form and his demon form. In less than a minute, he had killed a total of 12 elite vampire nobles. There was no doubt that his strength had long surpassed most of the lords and was not inferior to some of the members of the secondary council. And when the dark energy was completely integrated into this world, his strength would be further enhanced. On the other side, the battle maniac Urban Best was up against Colden. With his unparalleled speed and the unique energy system of the Azeroth bandits, he severely injured the Vampire Duke in less than 30 seconds. Even if the other party had vaporized himself many times, he could not escape the fatal cuts of the Spellbreaker. His body was full of bloody holes. Even though such an injury was far from fatal to a vampire, the loss of large amounts of blood would undoubtedly weaken the vampire's mobility. Jessie Livermore stared at Brenda with her favorite toy. If the latter dared to move, she would immediately be besieged by more than 100 ghosts and sutured corpse giants. "What are you going to do with me?" Brenda, who knew that she had lost, looked up and asked. "It's simple. In my hometown, there's a proverb that goes, 'Give someone a taste of their own medicine.' Don't worry, I've already sent for your beloved wife. Later, I will inject this seed in her heart and let you die in extreme pleasure. In addition, your relatives and children will suffer the same fate. How about it? Am I very kind and considerate? After all, the most important thing for a family is to be neat." Zhang Cheng did not hide his inner anger and desire for revenge. He wanted to use a bloody baptism to let the whole of North America know how serious the consequences of angering him were. No negotiation, no compromise. He did not care about the so-called consequences. There was only the brutality of, "I would rather kill the wrong person than let them go." Anyone who showed such intentions would not only be killed, but also their children, friends, parents, brothers, and relatives would all be killed. As a butcher whose hands were already stained with the blood of the innocent, Zhang Cheng did not mind using the deaths of hundreds and thousands of people as a warning to potential enemies. In his eyes, life and soul were no longer as precious as many universal values promoted, but a cheap, renewable, and recyclable resource. As long as it did not endanger the cycle of life and death, it did not matter if 1 million, 10 million, or 100 million died. Anyway, people would die eventually. Even if he did not kill them, humans would use all kinds of excuses to kill each other. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful book mobile version website.com. Chapter 585. The Waldorf Astoria Park Avenue in Manhattan was the most famous and historic hotel in the United States. It was said that every president of the United States had stayed here since 1929 and had witnessed many important events in the recent history of the United States and the world. However, very few people knew that this hotel was actually the property and lair of the New York vampire family. All the noble vampires in New York gathered here on weekdays to enjoy their luxurious and promiscuous lives. To some extent, the vampires deliberately got involved with the upper echelons of the human world to protect themselves and prevent themselves from angering a powerful enemy. The other party would take the political influence into consideration when making a move, and thus by some time to escape or negotiate. But today, this was the end of the hotel. Apocalypse Guardian Polak Succubus Ren, Fallen Angel Shamir, and a large number of people provided by the Marcus family directly froze the entire hotel and its surroundings. After expelling all the guests, they rushed in from the main entrance and started a massacre. There was no mercy. There was no mercy. There was no so-called consideration. Whether it was the vampires or the ordinary people who served them, they were all on the list to be slaughtered. In just half an hour, blood dyed the ground red. Corpses that were torn apart and mutilated could be seen at any moment, especially the unlucky ones that were killed by the two burning legion demons. Even their souls were not spared and turned into crystalline soul fragments. Blood, despair, death, and delicious souls. What a wonderful taste. How good would it be if Master could let us carry out such a mission every day? Rin licked her seductive red lips and let out moans that were enough to make any man's blood boil. Oomph. They're all trash. Polak shook the bloodstains on his sword, and his eyes shot out boiling, evil flames. Succubus smiled and came to the side of the Apocalypse Guardian. He waved his whip and comforted, "Don't worry, my friend. Have you forgotten that our real mission is to deal with those guys hiding underground? I believe that there will always be one or two of these little things that can satisfy your inner desire for battle." "I hope so." Just as he finished speaking, Polak suddenly raised his greatsword and slashed open a 10-centimeter thick steel plate, revealing an elevator entrance that led deep underground. Under the corrosion of the sword wrapped in evil flames, the alloy technology that modern humans were proud of was completely vulnerable and as fragile as tofu. There was no hesitation. He jumped down, and at the moment when he was about to collide with the ground, he flapped his wings to counteract the gravitational acceleration and landed steadily. "Open fire. Don't let this monster get close." The vampire guard guarding the only entrance shouted as he pulled down the heavy machine gun. For a moment, a metal storm formed from countless bullets instantly enveloped the Doom Guard's massive body. Useless things. The 12 7mm bullets were blocked by a layer of demonic shield before they could even get close to him. He raised his hand and waved it. A scorching evil fireball flew out and burned two vampires into charcoal. The machine gun also turned into hot molten iron. The Doom Sentinel did not give the enemy any time to react. It charged forward and raised its hoof to perform a war trample, causing the enemy to fall off their horses. Then it swung its great sword and slashed twice, chopping off the heads of 4 to 5 vampire nobles. Looking at the monster that was bathed in blood, the rest of the vampires finally reacted and shouted angrily, "Go! Kill him! Otherwise, we will all die." Seeing this scene, Polak didn't shrink back. Instead, he roared happily, "That's right. That's it. Use your lowly lives to please me. The Legion is invincible." Puff! In an instant, another 2 unlucky vampires were cut in half at the waist. Blood and intestines flowed all over the ground. Have fun. Shamir and I will go complete the mission given by Master. Come on, little cutie. The enemy won't give up easily. Rin, who followed closely behind, didn't care about the bloody scene in front of her. After sending a flying kiss, she pulled the fallen angel and walked toward the room behind her. A few of the vampires who tried to stop them were swallowed by the shadow energy from the distorted time and space before they could react, turning into soulless shells. It did not take long for the most powerful vampire lair in New York to be wiped out by the terrifying massacre. Only 6 of Calvin's closest direct descendants survived. Of course, this didn't mean that they had escaped, but a more cruel fate was waiting for them. At the same time, in a rather luxurious villa in the Bronx, the same scene was playing out. Brenda's wife, parents, children, and lovers were all captured alive by Zhang Cheng's men. His trusted subordinates were all slaughtered without exception. The main person in charge of the operation glanced at the list and immediately ordered in a low voice, "Go. Kill the rest of the guys on this list. Don't leave anyone alive. All of them. There are more than 500 people on this list." Another person in charge had panic and fear in his eyes. There was no way not to be afraid. Although the war in the underground world was often fierce and brutal, this was the first time so many people were implicated at once. He couldn't believe that there were people in the world who were so crazy. They didn't care about the consequences at all in order to launch revenge. Shut up. If you don't want to die, then do your job. Don't forget, the councilman we are loyal to is not a pushover. Imagine the Brooklyn cleansing operation. Anyone who dared to defy his will would be eradicated. Tell me, idiot, do you want to die? The former threatened while gnashing his teeth. The latter quickly shook his head. No, no, very good. Remember, don't try to play the trick of letting people go in private. Men, women, old people, and children, kill them all. Otherwise, you, your family, and friends will die. Understood? Don't worry, I don't want to die yet. After a short conversation, the middle-aged man in his 40s took a deep breath, turned around, stepped on the corpses and blood, and left the villa. He took a few of his subordinates to the next target. Although this kind of bottomless slaughter made him feel uneasy, he finally chose to obey after considering the consequences of disobeying orders. The reason was simple. As a resident of the underground world who just came to New York, he needed to hold on tightly to a thick and strong thigh to gain a foothold. He didn't need to worry about his wife and children being threatened. Looking at the slightly gloomy sky above his head, he had a premonition that the moon would be red tonight, dyed red by countless blood. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile reading website. Chapter 586. As the entire sky above New York was shrouded in thick clouds, it didn't take long for large snowflakes to fall from the sky and cover the entire city. Sitting on the sofa in the living room at home, Zhang Cheng enjoyed the beautiful snowy scenery outside, while gently stroking the fair face of the vampire girl who had just been sent over. He asked without looking up, "Duke Cole, then, this must be your favorite great-granddaughter, right? She's so beautiful. She's just like a beautiful doll. Stay away from her. You're crazy." The vampire Duke roared with his two blood-red eyes. After 3 hours of continuous fighting, he had lost about 2/3 of his blood that represented his strength. His youthful appearance had also begun to age. Some of his wounds had even stopped healing. On the surface, he looked like a wild beast that had fallen into a trap, tired and dangerous. Don't get excited. Don't worry, I won't kill her now. On the contrary, I intend to let her live until tomorrow morning to welcome the sunrise at dawn. In addition, I heard that after the vampire nobles are exposed to sunlight, their souls will begin to burn fiercely, showing incomparably beautiful fireworks. Zhang Cheng said with a smile that made everyone present feel creepy. Death, especially the eternal death of the soul, it was something that all intelligent life would be afraid of. Even the undead were no exception. The vampire girl seemed to feel the cruel fate that was about to come. She began to tremble involuntarily, and her eyes revealed a pitiful light. Perhaps if it were other men, they would soon soften under such gaze, or even fall madly in love with the other party. But unfortunately, Zhang Qing not only did not show a trace of pity, but instead sneered and mocked. Pretending to be pitiful? Come on, you're a vampire. A monster that can only survive by sucking the vitality of living people. Although you're young, I believe that you've sucked at least hundreds of lives to death. Tell me, if you think you're innocent, how do you explain those who died? Great evil master, Ren took the opportunity to come up with a suggestion. I think these little things that live by sucking blood seem to have a lot of potential. If you don't mind, I hope to get a few of them and try to bestow them with shadow energy, so that they can work for the army. Ever since she discovered that spreading shadow energy could increase her strength by several folds, she gradually developed from a demon who lured souls into depravity to the path of a missionary. No matter what she encountered, she wanted to inject some shadow energy into their bodies. In fact, recently, this cunning succubus had joined forces with fallen angel Shamir and successfully attacked several low-level angels hiding among ordinary people, forcibly corrupting their cores. It wouldn't be long before there would be a team of fallen angels made up entirely of shadow angels. Oh, you think they have potential? Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. After all, be it shadow or dark energy, they were not magical energy in the ordinary sense, especially the former, which originated from the distortion of time and space. Once a life form could not bear and control it, it would be instantly devoured by shadow energy, leaving nothing behind. He who had long disregarded human life had done many experiments a long time ago and found that even among the residents of the underworld, there were not many who could become users of shadow energy. On the contrary, the angels, who were very sensitive to energy, once their cores were infused with shadow energy, they could all become excellent shadow warlocks. But the number of angels in the human world was far less than that. If there was another race that could completely replace them, then it wouldn't be long before another burning legion was resurrected in this world. Of course, I'm very sure, these cute little things have an innate evil curse flowing in their bodies. They're the perfect carriers of shadow energy. Of course, I'm not asking you to let them go. I'm just going to capture some from other places and use them to form an army of shadow spellcasters for you. Succubus suggested as she swayed her seductive body. There was no doubt that she wanted to use this opportunity to obtain the power that she had long desired. Zhang Cheng rubbed his chin and pondered for a moment. Soon he nodded lightly. All right, I'll give you half a month's time to clean up all the vampire families in New York State. Tell them that they can either obey or die. There's no third option. Ha! As you wish, my dear master. I guarantee that you will soon have an army of warlocks that can destroy your enemies. Ren, who had gotten what she wanted, had a glint of excitement and anticipation in her eyes. I hope so. All right, bring these vampire captives down. Tomorrow morning, throw them all under the sunlight and burn them to death. Next, let us deal with the living. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng turned his gaze to Brenda, who had been standing motionlessly in the same spot. Brenda clenched her fists tightly and replied with a face full of hatred. You demon in human skin, you'll suffer retribution sooner or later. Retribution? Wow, I didn't know that you actually believed in this. Do you know? The so-called retribution is just an excuse that the weak use to comfort themselves and hypnotize themselves. Only in this way can they numb themselves and struggle to continue living, instead of mustering the courage to fight to the death with the enemy. Unfortunately, you are now an out-and-out weakling. What's even more unfortunate is that you'll have to watch your parents, wife, children, and lovers die under your own vicious spells. As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and pointed in the direction of Brenda's family. In less than half a minute, the blood vessels all over their bodies began to explode wildly. Scarlet blood gushed out like a fountain. Finally, with a plop, they fell into a pool of blood. As a powerful mage, he easily deciphered the spell structure of the Seed of Death and improved it before casting it. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Watching her youngest son twitch and die, Brenda finally lost control of her emotions and rushed forward like a madman. Bright red blood tears flowed out of her eyes. But before she rushed forward, Doomsday Guardian Pollock took a step forward, swung his sandbag-sized fist, and directly knocked her down to the ground. Feeling the crazy and painful emotions of his enemy, Zhang Cheng's face showed a satisfied expression. See? This is the result of trying to anger me. Jesse, aren't you trying to make a powerful living corpse? This guy is now yours. Let me remind you, the strength of the undead is based on strong negative emotions. The more painful and desperate the soul is, the easier it is to become what you want after death. I understand, boss. Jessie Livermore came closer in her 10-centimeter high heels, bent down, winked playfully, and said to Brenda, Dear Senator, I hope you don't hate me, because you will soon experience the most extreme pain that will make you feel that death is an incomparably beautiful and luxurious relief. Chapter 587. Fear was a kind of power, an extremely powerful kind of power. In fact, the development of mankind so far, whether it was the ancient tribal system, slavery system, feudal system, totalitarian system, or the democracy and universal suffrage that were being advocated now, they all relied on fear to build the most basic order and ruling structure. The only difference was that some fear originated from life's instinctive rejection of pain and death, while some were more complicated. First, a series of legal systems were established that were beneficial to the ruling class. then punishment was used to make the people revere the law, thus achieving the final result of protecting their own interests. But no matter what, fear was the root of all this, a nightmare rooted in the depths of everyone's subconscious. But interestingly, there was a need to control the degree of fear. If it was not enough, it would lead to a strong desire for revenge. And if it was too much, it would arouse a strong desire to survive, leading to large-scale resistance and riots. As a psychic who could read the memories and deep thoughts of others, Zhang Cheng was undoubtedly very clear on how to control the degree of fear others had for him. In just 2 weeks, the entire New York state ushered in the first reshuffle of power. Anyone who was unlucky enough to be related to vampires or Brenda became the target of purging. More than 700 people were executed. There were also 800 vampires who were publicly executed by sunlight. After this round of cruel and merciless attacks, the activities of vampires in New York State had basically disappeared completely. They were just short of putting up a sign in public, saying, "Vampires and bastards with vampire blood are not allowed to enter. Otherwise, they will be executed." No one knew that there were more than 450 vampires who were willing to abandon everything, let their bodies and souls embrace the shadows, and completely submit to Succubus Ren, becoming the world's first batch of shadow warlocks. Of course, such a bloody massacre that targeted an entire race still caused quite a stir in the underground world. Especially the vampire families in other parts of North America, they all expressed their concerns to the council, fearing that they would be implicated. In order to solve the growing panic in the underground world, Cosmo had to use his authority as the speaker to inform all the council members to convene an emergency meeting. As the 13 candles were lit one by one, the 13 members of the North American Supreme Council once again gathered and sat in their respective seats. However, this time, Zhang Cheng wasn't the one being summoned and questioned. Instead, he became one of them. Glancing at his colleagues, who were either interested or unconcerned, he immediately understood what the topic was today. He said with a self-mocking smile, "It seems that I've gone overboard recently, haven't I?" "Ah, don't mind it too much. It's just some vampires complaining." When did those bugs become qualified to influence the decisions of the highest council? Moreover, some of them even dared to assassinate a distinguished counselor. As long as you nod your head, I will eradicate all the vampires in my jurisdiction. A male counselor with short silver-gray hair laughed and patted Zhang Cheng's shoulder. Obviously, in his eyes, even if all the vampires in the world were to band together, they would not be able to compare to the friendship of a master alchemist. Moreover, this master alchemist had also brought dragon eggs, as well as precious knowledge on raising young dragons. As for the vampires, they were just a bunch of dark creatures that couldn't be brought to the table. If their lowly lives could be exchanged for enough benefits, it was likely that they would soon be killed and become a rare species. That's right, they're just vampires. Compared to your great value, they're not even worth mentioning. Another female counselor smiled in agreement. Seeing that the counselors had already begun to side with Zhang Cheng before the meeting had even begun, the speaker finally could not help but cough and remind them, "Ahem, everyone, please watch your words. Vampires are also part of the underground world. You can't treat them as black slaves that were trafficked to America over 200 years ago." Black slaves? I'm sorry, respected speaker. In my eyes, they're not even as good as black slaves. At least black slaves can be sold for a good price, right? Laffern curled his lips in disdain. Enough. I've gathered all of you here today to solve the problem, not to let the panic continue to spread. Cosmo knocked on the table helplessly. Don't worry, speaker. I've already completed my revenge operation. I don't plan to do anything to the remaining vampires. Zhang Cheng expressed his attitude straightforwardly. He was not an idiot. He knew when to stop. Expanding the attack area would only attract more enemies and would not have any effect at all. "Oh, you're willing to stop?" The speaker raised his eyebrows in surprise. In his impression, Zhang Cheng had always been a young man who would seek revenge for the slightest grievance, and even had a somewhat crazy and extreme personality. Therefore, he could not believe that this matter would end just like that. After all, trying to kill a counselor of the highest council was not a small crime. Any kind of violent revenge was reasonable. Zhang Cheng smiled and shrugged his shoulders. Of course, I've already gotten what I wanted, which is awe and fear. I believe that no one will dare to question my position, ability, and means anymore. Okay, I understand. After getting the answer he wanted, Cosmo nodded slightly. However, after pondering for a moment, he suddenly asked, Dear Zhang, I wonder if you have the ability to make a life-prolonging potion? Life-prolonging potion? Why do you ask this? Could it be? A strange look flashed in Zhang Cheng's eyes. I'm already 140 years old, and I've used magic many times to forcefully delay the time of my physical body's death. If you can make a potion that can increase my lifespan, I'm willing to pay any price. Cosmo did not try to hide anything, and openly stated his purpose. After all, the date of his death was not a secret in the eyes of many people. I see. Please don't worry. I'll give you a satisfactory product in a month at most. Zhang Cheng stood up and bowed with one hand on his chest. Perhaps a few months ago, the life-prolonging potion would still be a huge challenge for him. But now, after going to the Faron continent, he had already obtained at least 12 different life-prolonging potion formulas with different ingredients. In fact, any capable high-level mage on the Faron continent would use life-prolonging potions to escape death. As early as the Netheril civilization, the Arcanist had used them time and time again to escape from the god of death, Jaeger. In modern times, new things were introduced, and even the taste had been modified several times. The most effective one could even delay one's death by 25 years. The only thing he had to do next was to choose a suitable one from these formulas and give it to the speaker. He believed that this wise old man in front of him would definitely be able to give him what he wanted the most, knowledge. Please remember the domain name of this book.com, wonderful book mobile version website.com. Chapter 588. After the short meeting, Lafern grabbed Zhang Cheng and asked curiously, Can you really concoct a life-prolonging potion? After all, the Supreme Council was not a bureaucratic organization in the world of ordinary people. They would not gather together to talk nonsense for a long time. Maybe the grumpy representatives would even roll up their sleeves and take off their shoes to put on a good fight. On the contrary, the efficiency of the underground world had always been known for its speed, stability, accuracy, and ruthlessness. Therefore, the short discussion only lasted for less than 10 minutes before it came to an end. However, after hearing about the life-prolonging potion, some of the counselors were not in a hurry to leave. Lafern was just one of them. Looking at the other party's eyes that were full of prying desire, Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. Of course, but it's very troublesome. You have to understand that things like vitality cannot be made up by alchemy alone. It also needs some precious and special materials, such as the essence extracted from fresh life. You mean, the life-prolonging potion requires the sacrifice of one's life? Lafern frowned subconsciously. No, I didn't say that. What I mean is that one of its most important materials is very precious and rare. Zhang Cheng explained ambiguously. I understand. Lafern realized that this might involve some secrets about alchemy. Soon, he left through the teleportation spell on the chair. The other counselors followed closely behind. After a while, only Zhang Cheng was left in the empty underground chamber. Feeling that there was no one else around, he smiled and sighed. Who wouldn't want to escape death and extend one's life? I hope this bait can bring me more knowledge, as well as clues about the seal and the key. As soon as he finished speaking, he also turned into a shadow and disappeared with the candlelight on the table. At the same time, in an abandoned factory in the suburbs of New York, Succubus Ren was standing on a high platform, looking down at the dense crowd of shadow vampires kneeling on the ground. She raised her whip and shouted, Cheer! Lowly ants! From today onwards, you will follow me, the great Shadow Queen, to learn powerful spells and become a part of the spellcaster army. Great Queen, may I know what an army is? A vampire noble who looked to be about 30 years old raised his head and asked in a trembling voice. Oof. A lowly person like you doesn't have the right to know the name of the Legion. In the next year, I will teach you what true power is, a power that can destroy everything. After the lesson is over, I will give you a test. Those who fail will be eliminated and become food for the winner. Core, we don't need trash. Ren gave the answer with a cold smile as she lashed out with her whip. As a member of the Burning Legion, she wasn't some compassionate saintess. Instead, she was a cruel, cunning, and power-hungry demon. In fact, from the very beginning, she was prepared to eliminate half of them. In other words, out of the 400 vampires, only 200 would survive. The rest would be consumed in the process of trying to control the shadow energy. Before a race was fully tested, no one knew how much shadow energy they could withstand, let alone what kind of control method they were more suitable for. In short, everything required a lot of experiments. And the experiments would inevitably bring about all kinds of accidents, even death and disasters. On the other hand, Zhang Cheng, who had returned to the Long Island mansion, didn't stay idle. He went into the alchemy lab that had just been built not long ago and began to carefully mix the first bottle of life-prolonging potion in his life. In order to ensure the success rate, he didn't try to directly challenge the most difficult 25 years formula. Instead, he chose the 15-year formula, which was slightly more difficult but not beyond the scope of his skills. "Dear, what are you doing?" Elizabeth heard the slight movement from the basement and hurried over to check. "Nothing. I'm mixing a magic potion," Zhang Cheng explained without turning his head. "Magic potion? Can I watch from the side?" An interested expression appeared on the girl's face. Due to the awakening of the witch's bloodline, she had been crazily learning all kinds of knowledge related to magic recently. She hated that she couldn't crack open her head and stuff everything she didn't know into it. If she had this drive when she was in school, it wouldn't have been a problem even if she got into Harvard, Stanford, or MIT. However, it was a pity that natural science was too boring and had a very high demand on one's intelligence. Few people could persist in it, and it was also impossible for them to be rewarded with incredible power for every bit of effort they put in like magic. Glancing at the excitement and anticipation in his girlfriend's eyes, Zhang Cheng smiled and nodded. "Of course, but please be quiet. Also, before we really start, you have to know that mixing a magic potion is a very precise operation. It not only requires a smart brain, but also a lot of knowledge and experience. It's not like what you think, where you throw some weird things into a big pot and stew them, then chant a few spells to succeed. Understood? Trust me, I'll be a good girl and a good student." Elizabeth solemnly patted her chest, completely unaware of how alluring her two little bunnies were when they trembled at that moment. "Very good. Then let's start now." After saying that, Zhang Cheng erased the beautiful scene in his mind and lit up the alcohol lamp with practiced movements. He placed a small bottle of solution containing magical energy on top of the lamp and heated it up. Then, he quickly chopped up a few herbs that were used to induce the effect. When the solution kept bubbling, he quickly threw in the herbs. Bang! A light purple flame spewed out from the test tube. Fortunately, it only lasted for less than 2 seconds before the flame turned into a purple mist that filled the sky. Feeling the level of magic contained in the mist, Zhang Cheng immediately threw in the most important thing in the life-prolonging potion, a small piece of purified life essence, and raised his hands high and started chanting loudly. In fact, the so-called life essence was actually a special substance that was extracted from the body of a living creature, and it was full of surging vitality. It was just that in Azeroth, it was limited to the elemental life and plant life of nature. But in fact, even the fire essence, air essence, water essence, and necromancy essence were a type of life essence. The spellcasters of the Pharaon continent had long since found a way to transform different types of life essence into each other. So to them, the type was not important. What they cared about was the quality, the amount, and purity of the life essence contained. With the guidance of the spell, in just a few minutes, the life essence was completely dispersed in the solution, showing a very attractive red color. Without a doubt, a precious potion that could extend one's life by 15 years was successfully created just like that. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 589. That's it. Elizabeth blinked her eyes blankly and asked. Obviously, she could not understand the intense conversion process between matter and energy in just a few minutes. She could not even see the bright crystallization of the life essence after it was blended into the potion in another form. Zhang Cheng carefully sealed his mouth and nodded with a smile. That's right. How about it? Tell me what you've learned. No, I haven't learned anything. Forget it. This thing seems to be a bit difficult for beginners. I better go back and start from the basics. The girl helplessly shrugged her shoulders. Ever since the awakening of the witch's bloodline, she had barely learned how to use her mind to move things that were less than 20 kilograms. Occasionally, she could also release a mental attack that was enough to send an adult male flying. Other than that, she had not made any progress. Don't worry, I believe that you are very talented. It's just that you haven't shown it yet. Zhang Cheng stretched out his hand and gently touched the faintly discernible magic lines on his girlfriend's cheeks. One must know that the innate facial lines were a sign of being favored by magic energy. It also meant that one had great power. Looking at the history of the underground world, it was not difficult to see that all witches who had awakened their bloodline with facial lines had, without exception, obtained achievements that ordinary witches could not imagine. Moreover, he could feel that these facial lines seemed to contain a combination of magic symbols that he had never seen before. Perhaps the source of the witch Catherine's bloodline was a lesser demon king or a real demon king. Are you sure this is not a consolation? Elizabeth tilted her head and seemed to be in disbelief. Consolation? No, of course not, I promise. Oh, right? You have been resting at home for more than half a month. It's best to quickly find a high school to study in. Otherwise, the false guardian information arranged by the Pullman may be exposed. Zhang Cheng carefully put away the life-prolonging potion and reminded her with a smile. Upon hearing this, Elizabeth immediately replied with a bitter face, Don't worry, I have already found a good school. I should be able to enter the school tomorrow. Oh, which high school? Zhang Cheng's face showed a trace of surprise. After all, in his impression, his girlfriend was a bad student. She could barely read and write English, let alone mathematics, physics, chemistry, and other science subjects. She had no interest in studying at all. After the age of 13, she spent most of her time doing odd jobs and making money. St. Jonas High School, the public high school I went to before. When Elizabeth said this, she raised her head and looked at her boyfriend's reaction nervously. After all, anyone who wasn't a fool would understand how polarized the education system in the United States was. The expensive private high schools were the places that truly nurtured high-level talents. They implemented an out-and-out elite education. Whether it was the strength of the teachers or the strictness of the management, they were no worse than the key high schools in the Celestial Empire, or even better. As for the so-called happy education public high schools, they were basically no different from scum training centers. Excluding a few very good exceptions, most public high schools were located in poor neighborhoods. A fifth of the students were already carrying a thick stack of criminal records before they even graduated. Selling illegal narcotics, guns, and men and women messing around on campus were common occurrences. Even teachers sometimes needed to carry a gun for self-defense to have a sense of security. In such an environment, not to mention studying honestly, if one didn't enter a gang after graduation, one would be considered a good kid. Elizabeth was undoubtedly very clear about this, which was why she acted so guilty. Can you give me a reason? Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows and asked. Although he didn't try to read the girl's memory, he could judge from her reaction that this St. Jonas High School was definitely not a good school. Well, I have a lot of friends there. Is this reason enough? Elizabeth weakly probed. Friends? Yes, friends. Almost all of my friends from childhood to middle school are there. What's more, now that I have money, I plan to go back and show it off. The vanity of a young girl, you know? Elizabeth pretended to playfully wink her eyes. Zhang Cheng stared at his girlfriend's eyes for a full minute before finally nodding. Well, in principle, I won't interfere with your choice. But there's one thing. Don't easily reveal your identity as a witch. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll have to say goodbye to all your former friends. The Parliament isn't a charity. Ordinary people who know about the existence of the underground world only have two choices. One is to integrate, and the other is to become a target of elimination. To be honest, he could understand the girl's desire to return to a familiar environment. He also understood that after experiencing the chaos of the awakening of the bloodline, there was always a trace of fear in the depths of her heart. Coupled with the inevitable desire to compare and show off brought by youth, this choice was not worth making a fuss about. Okay, I know the rules. In order to express my gratitude, I've decided to change into that set of clothes tonight. Elizabeth licked her lips and hinted with a seductive voice. Oh, that set? Are you sure? Zhang Cheng's eyes lit up slightly. He looked up and down at the girl's curvy figure, his eyes revealing a strong sense of aggression. Huh, I knew you've been looking forward to it. Just wait, you'll get what you want tonight. After saying that, Elizabeth left a meaningful look, turned around, and skipped back upstairs to prepare. Even though the two of them had already tried many interesting things, when she thought of the strong visual impact of that set of clothes, she still felt a little shy and embarrassed. Watching his girlfriend disappear at the end of the stairs, Zhang Cheng smiled and muttered to himself, "Very good. Looks like I'm in luck tonight. But before that, I still need to send this plaything out." Just as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and lightly snapped his fingers. Pa! In an instant, a bird completely composed of magical energy appeared out of thin air and landed steadily on the table, its eyes wide open as it waited for its master's orders. Go! Send this to a villa with a black obelisk in Venice Beach, Los Angeles. Chirp, chirp. The magical bird let out a pleasant chirp, indicating that it understood. It then picked up the life-prolonging potion and swallowed it into its stomach. It then soared into the air and flew straight to the west. According to its flying speed, it would be delivered to Chairman Cosmo in about a week to half a month. But if there were any accidents in the middle, it would be hard to say. The reason why Zhang Cheng chose to use the magical bird was because he was hoping that someone would intercept the life-prolonging potion halfway. To him, the benefits of losing this potion halfway was far greater than directly delivering it. It would be best if it caused a huge uproar in the underground world, because the more people went crazy for the sake of prolonging their lives, the more valuable he, a master alchemist who could concoct life-prolonging potions, would be. Chapter 590. Early in the morning the next day, Elizabeth yawned and slowly got up from the soft bed. She looked in the mirror to check the kiss marks and bruises on her body, as well as the clothes that were almost torn to pieces. A faint blush appeared on her face. She didn't expect that her boyfriend, who always gave people the impression of being rational and calm, would turn into a beast and give her 2 hours of wild excitement. Even thinking about it now made her feel hot all over. But unfortunately, she didn't have much time to think about it. She bent down and kissed Zhang Cheng's face, then rushed to the bathroom to take a shower and change her clothes. About 15 minutes later, the girl carried her bag and breakfast made by an invisible servant. She got into the most beautiful sports car in the garage, started the engine, and drove away along the road. For her, today not only meant a new day, but it also meant that she could meet her old friends and teach her old enemies a lesson. Don't think that the idea of riches and honor don't return home only existed in the East. On the contrary, it was also popular in the Western world. From the end of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, the nouveau riche in the United States were obsessed with the bloodline of the British aristocracy. They either married their sons to aristocratic wives or married their daughters to the United Kingdom. The latter alone was more than 200 people. The BBC in the United Kingdom also made a historical film, Million Ladies, to tell their stories, including the mother of Winston Churchill, Jenny Jerome, and the great-grandmother of Princess Diana, Frances Walker. Of course, there were also many complicated relationships and exchanges between money, power, and social status behind this. But with Elizabeth's relatively simple way of thinking, she didn't think that much for the time being. It was just the most primitive human needs that came from the depths of her subconscious, the desire to be recognized by more people. Obviously, As a girl from the slums, it was impossible for her to be recognized and accepted by the children of the rich families, because there was a huge difference in behavior, habits, and values between the two sides, and that small circle with strict hierarchy was not something that could be entered by suddenly becoming rich overnight. Although on the surface, the United States was a completely capitalist country, but the amount of wealth didn't completely equate to social status, and pure money didn't represent wealth. Most of the time, the influence of a tycoon did not refer to his net worth, but the degree of control he had over a certain industry and whether that industry was important or not. Take the U.S. steel industry as an example. Although the profits of the three major steel companies have been declining after the restructuring and many of their subsidiaries have been layoffs and bankruptcy, the market value was only about $3 billion USD, which was not even comparable to a large internet company. However, the major shareholders of these companies still had influence in all aspects of the country. They were able to throw more than 90% of the internet companies with a market value of more than 100 million yuan by dozens of streets. After all, steel was the backbone of a country. It was the foundation of military and material craftsmanship. As long as the U.S. government officials did not collectively lose their minds, they would never allow their steel industry to close down or go bankrupt. By the same logic, if a person only had money, then he would never be accepted by the upper class of the United States. He might even encounter all kinds of difficulties, fraud, or even kidnapping and extortion. In the eyes of capitalists, such a guy was a pig that had been fattened up. He deserved to be torn to pieces and devoured. From a certain perspective, Elizabeth, who had more than 30 million and close to 40 million in assets, was a very fat little lamb. Ever since she had inherited Catherine's inheritance, there had been more than 40 visits or calls to promote financial management and investment projects with a large number of traps. Fortunately, she had already seen the sinister side of human nature. She would rather put her money in the bank than invest in things that she was not familiar with. With a happy mood, the girl parked her sports car directly in front of the school gate. She jumped out and shouted at the black youth in front of a shabby car repair shop. "Jefferson, look after my car for me. Remember, if I lose a tire when I come back, you'll be in big trouble. **T. You're Elizabeth?" The black youth called Jefferson opened his mouth in shock. "That's right, buddy. I'm back again. How is it? Are you happy to see me?" Elizabeth swung her long golden hair like a waterfall. "Oh God, it's really you? Why did you come back? Didn't you inherit a large fortune and go to live a good life?" Jefferson asked excitedly. "No reason. I suddenly realized that I don't get along with those cheese in the Upper East Side. The little cheese in San Jonas Heights are more to my taste." Then, Elizabeth took out a bulging envelope and stuffed it into his hand. Jefferson opened it subconsciously and saw that it was a thick stack of money. There were at least $6,000 to $7,000. He was so shocked that he quickly hid it. He exclaimed nervously, "Damn it. Why did you give me so much money? I guarantee that if anyone on this street knows that I have $6,000 to $7,000 on me, they'll probably get shot within 10 steps. Shoo, if we don't say anything, who would know? Moreover, you've helped me teach a lot of scumbags who try to touch me all these years. Now that I have money, I naturally have to repay you." The girl smiled and punched the black youth's chest with her fist. "Ha ha, all right, looks like you're really rich. Don't worry, I guarantee that no one will dare to touch your car here." The latter laughed happily. Perhaps for the rich, $6,000 to $7,000 might not be enough to buy a bottle of slightly better red wine. However, for the poor who lived at the bottom of society, that was almost the sum of their income if they didn't eat or drink for a few months. Just as Elizabeth wanted to say something about the location, a fat girl with a rather strong body suddenly stopped in her tracks. She widened her eyes and screamed, "Ah, God, Elizabeth, my good sister, you're back." "Hey, yes, Camilla, I'm back. Quick, give your best sister a hug." Of course, Camilla said nothing and opened her arms to give Elizabeth a warm bear hug. She even used her amazing strength to lift her friend up high to express the excitement in her heart. After the hug, she noticed the exquisite sports car parked by the side of the road. She asked excitedly. So, the rumors are true? You inherited a large fortune? Are you a rich man now? Uh-huh. It's just a small fortune. At least, it's nothing compared to my boyfriend. Did you know? Just before Christmas, someone gave him a luxurious mansion in Long Island that's worth tens of millions of dollars. Elizabeth pretended to casually reveal some information about the residence. What? *T. I'm very grateful to you damn rich people. The three young people who were talking and laughing did not notice that there were two pairs of eyes staring at them not far away. One of them was Zhang Chung himself, and the other was Jesse Livermore. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 591. Boss, aren't you overprotective? Jessie asked without turning her head as she ate a hot dog she bought from a roadside stall in the driver's seat. Overprotective? Why would you have such an idea? Zhang Chung asked with a faint smile. Isn't that so? Elizabeth just changed to a public school with a slightly worse environment, and you specially came over to take a look. I guess when I was in school, even my parents didn't care about me this much. Jessie explained with a face full of envy and jealousy. Through the rearview mirror, Zhang Chung saw the expression on the slightly neurotic girl's face. He smiled and waved his hand. No, of course not. You think I'm protecting Elizabeth? I'm actually just protecting the last piece of pure land in my heart. Do you know? From a psychological point of view, the more a person lacks something, the more he or she desires it. Just like a mafia boss, what they desire the most is not to get rid of their competitors, but to be the king of a place. What they really want is an ordinary life where they don't have to worry about being killed, or a pure love that is mixed with money, power, and threats. The reason is very simple. It's not that an ordinary life and a beautiful and pure love are rare and precious, but for mafia members whose hands are already stained with blood, it's the last piece of pure land in their hearts. Think about it. How many vicious drug dealers and mafia bosses in the world have a family that carefully protects them, or a lover or family member that they deeply love? Remember, Jessie, there are three kinds of motivation that support a person's life. The first is ambition and desire. The second is the hope and spiritual sustenance that I mentioned just now. And the third is strong hatred. I don't want to become a monster that only relies on the first and third motivation to live. That kind of life is too sad. Jessie Livermore swallowed the food in her mouth and nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand a little. Elizabeth has something that you desire but can never get. So protecting her is protecting the pure land and hope in your heart? That's right. Do you want to see me completely fall into darkness and become a reckless madman? Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a trace of darkness, bloodlust, and madness. No, not all. Jessie was undoubtedly aware of this and subconsciously shivered. One had to know that the recent 2 weeks of crazy purges had already made her feel that many people were filled with the thick smell of blood. If this continued all day long, she was afraid that it wouldn't take long for her to have a mental breakdown. Just like sociologists said, although the world is dark, politics is dirty, and human nature is ugly, human beings always need a little light and hope to support themselves to survive, even if the light and hope are fake. All right, let's go. Since Elizabeth has the ability to protect herself, there's no need for us to continue wasting time here. Go to the outskirts of New York. My nominal mother is still waiting for me at the construction site. After that, Zhang Chung picked up his phone and showed the address in the text message. Okay, I promise I'll be there in at most an hour. Jessie stepped on the accelerator and headed straight for the highway. After all, New York's traffic was notoriously congested, especially during the rush hour. It was common to be stuck for 2 to 3 hours. Only the highway situation was slightly better. Fortunately, Christmas just passed not long ago. Many people were still on vacation, so the traffic wasn't too much to bear. About 48 minutes later, the two sturdy off-road vehicles finally stopped next to a busy construction site. They saw a place the size of 2 standard stadiums. A large number of cranes and excavators were quickly digging the foundation. Even the hard frozen soil in winter couldn't resist the power of machinery. But there was one very suspicious thing. That was, when the foundation was dug, A steel pillar engraved with strange symbols was thrown in every certain distance. Those who knew that a large, fully enclosed plant cultivation center was going to be built here. Those who didn't know would think that it was some kind of strange art building. Listening to the loud noise made by the machinery, Zhang Qing opened the door and took the initiative to get out. Before he took a few steps, Zhang Ji, who had been waiting for a long time, came over with a Latino man who looked to be in his 50s with a hard hat. She asked with a smile, "How was Christmas?" "Not bad. Except for the terrible weather in New York, everything else was fine." Zhang Cheng deliberately pretended to be indifferent and spread out his hands. Since he learned that the seemingly smart and capable mother in front of him secretly hid a terrible desire for control, he subconsciously forced himself to be more vigilant. "Is that so? I thought you were not satisfied with the Christmas gift I gave you." Zhang Ji teased meaningfully. Zhang Cheng quickly responded with a smile. "How could that be? In my eyes, the 25% original shares are the best Christmas gift." "It's good that you understand." When the domineering mother heard this sentence, a satisfied expression appeared on her face. "Come, let me introduce you. This is Mr. Martin, who is in charge of the construction. He has a lot of construction problems to discuss with you face to face. After all, you made a lot of strange requests." "Hello, Mr. Zhang." The Mexican in his 50s took the initiative to extend his right hand. "Hello, Mr. Martin." Out of courtesy, Zhang Qing also extended his right hand to shake the other person's hand. Then he asked directly, "Is there anything you don't understand about the construction?" "Yes, sir." The old man called Martin quickly opened the blueprint in his hand and pointed at a few key points. "I don't understand. Why do you want to smash those iron pillars engraved with mysterious symbols into the foundation? This will greatly increase the difficulty of the construction and the cost of the construction. If it's possible, I hope you can remove them. That way, we can at least save $3 to $5 million of the budget." No. They are the most important part of this building. No matter what, they cannot be removed. Also, I want the steel plates and pipes embedded in the walls to not be changed at all. Otherwise, the whole building will lose its purpose. Zhang Cheng gave a negative answer without hesitation. These things were the most important part of the magic structure. Even if there were a few flaws in the construction, it would lead to the failure of the entire arcane garden, let alone removing a part of it. Of course, he could fix the small flaws one by elimination. However, if there was a problem with the main structure, even God would not be able to save it. "Can't be moved at all?" Martin widened his eyes in disbelief. As a Latino construction engineer who immigrated from Mexico to the United States, this was the first time he met an employer who was unwilling to reduce the construction cost. "Can't be moved at all. Not only can you not move, but you also have to ensure the quality. It's worth it no matter how much money you spend. Please remember the domain name of this book.com, mobile version of wonderfulbook.com." Chapter 592. Martin was a very responsible construction manager. After making sure that those seemingly useless structures could not be changed, he quickly turned around and left to continue the construction according to the design requirements on the drawings. As she watched him leave, Zhang Ji suddenly asked tentatively, "Can you tell me what's the use of those strange structures? That's an extra $8 to $10 million of investment. You have to give me a reason, right?" "Sorry, this is related to some unpatented biotechnology. It's better if you don't ask about it. Most importantly, after this place is completed, not only can I provide you with sufficient peacefulness flowers, I can also provide you with some other very valuable plants." Tell him the idea and principle of building a large arcane garden. Zhang Cheng was not stupid enough to say yes, so he had to change the topic. He knew that his controlling mother probably felt uneasy that 50% of the company's lifeblood was in the hands of an outsider, so she was eager to get her hands on it. Although this did not mean that she would immediately end the pleasant cooperation. Having insurance and not having insurance were two completely different things. In fact, according to Zhang Cheng's information, his nominal mother had already set up a technical public relations team in private, working day and night to research how to cultivate the peace bloom. Unfortunately, due to the lack of well water rich in arcane energy, those seeds did not germinate, let alone grow. After all, The magic energy in this world was far more complicated than arcane energy and harder to use. Unless it was transformed, it could not be absorbed by the magic plants in the world of Azeroth or Faerun. It was also because of this that she firmly believed that once she completely controlled the cultivation technology, the last piece of the puzzle of her ambitious business empire would be complete. As long as the cultivation technology was not cracked, her competitors would not be able to get the raw materials, and they would not be able to challenge her market share. Monopoly. What a beautiful word. As long as it was a capitalist, no one could resist such a temptation. After thinking for a while, Zhang Ji raised her head and asked in a very serious tone about the actual control of the biological laboratory. How much do you have? Can you make sure that the partner will not be taken away by others? Don't worry, I've already obtained all the relevant technology. Furthermore, that guy has gone to the dangerous Amazon rainforest. I guarantee that he will never come back alive. In other words, it won't be long before the laboratory completely belongs to me. Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and replied meaningfully. Oh, you sent someone to kill him. Zhang Ji's eyes widened in shock. Obviously, in her impression, her son had always been weak and kind. It was basically impossible for him to do such a thing. Zhang Cheng shook his head with a smile and made up a story. Kill? No, I just bribed a cannibal tour guide. He will lead my naive partners to some dangerous places. As for whether that poor fellow would be bitten to death by wild beasts or captured and eaten by the cannibal tribe, that's none of my business. Because this is fate and not a terrible murder, my hands are not stained with anyone's blood. After listening to this sentence, Zhang Ji's eyes flashed with light. After a full minute, she laughed happily. While laughing, she exclaimed, "Well done, my dear son. God, I can't believe this came out of your mouth. You know, I used to think that your personality was a bit like your father. A bit pedantic, a bit stupid, and a bit naive. But now, it seems that you're more like me. Can I take this as a disguised compliment?" Zhang Cheng pretended to be playful as he blinked his eyes. Of course, you have to understand that America's laws have never been made to protect the weak. On the contrary, it was made to protect the rich and powerful. Think about the interesting bail system, the jury system, the evidence collection system, and the expensive fees of top lawyers. Which one of these can be afforded by the poor? In this country, crime has never been a problem. The problem is whether you have money, whether you do it cleanly, and whether it is worth it. Zhang Ji's expression didn't change as she said this shocking statement. So you don't mind me committing a crime? Or even killing people? Zhang Cheng suddenly understood his mother's way of thinking. Without a doubt, she wasn't the kind of mother who wanted her son to succeed in life. Instead, she wanted her son to become a qualified capitalist. In the future, he could really be crowned as a king and inherit the huge business empire she created. Zhang Ji nodded lightly. Yes. Remember, in this country, being a legitimate businessman will never lead to success. If you want to stand out in the fierce competition, the only way is to be like a pack of wolves, constantly killing prey and devouring their flesh and blood to strengthen yourself. In a way, I am lucky to have such an outstanding son like you. As long as we work together, it won't be long before we break the ceiling and officially enter the real upper class. What I need to do? What you need to do is to provide me with an endless supply of plants with great commercial value, like the peace bloom. In return, everything I have in the future will eventually belong to you. You will be the only heir to all my assets. As you wish, mother. As the unusual conversation between the mother and son came to an end, the two fell into a short silence. Only the rumbling machinery on the construction site was still working without sleep. About 2 or 3 minutes later, Zhang Ji suddenly asked out of nowhere, "Do you miss your father?" Why do you suddenly ask this? A trace of doubt appeared on Zhang Cheng's face. No, it's nothing. As far as I know, he just returned to New York 2 days ago. If nothing unexpected happens, he should go to see you. The domineering mother forced herself to explain calmly. Sounds like good news? Zhang Cheng touched his chin with some uncertainty. He didn't know whether he should be happy or disgusted at this time. Because in principle, this cheap father had left home a long time ago and would only come back once every 3 or 4 years. Who knew what kind of cracks this strange situation would cause in the relationship between father and son? Most importantly, he didn't even know if this old man who had left home for many years was included in the Pullman's memory modification. It would be interesting if it was exposed. If you think this is good news, then it is good news. Although, in my opinion, other than providing a sperm, he didn't contribute anything to your birth and growth. But no matter what, you have a natural genetic affinity. But I'm a little curious. If he knew you had become like this, how would he react? Would he be furious with me? Or would he become even more decadent? Just thinking about it makes me excited. Chapter 593. On the top floor of Violet House, Zhang Cheng sat in the innermost office as he read through the information he just received. After a full 2 to 3 minutes, he raised his head and asked, "So, my nominal father didn't live alone for so many years. Instead, he established a new family?" "Yes, master. According to my investigation, 8 years ago, he remarried to a female diver named Liba and lived with her. They also have an adopted daughter who is not related by blood. This time, he brought his adopted daughter, Tanya, back to New York with him." Bowman replied in an unhurried manner. As the actual manager of the entire New York State underground world's huge ruling system, this slightly plump middle-aged man had shed his original cautious style in a short period of time and replaced it with a mature and steady temperament. Although his combat strength was not necessarily comparable to the knight guarding the entrance downstairs, but in terms of management and intelligence gathering, he was dozens of streets ahead of most lords and counselors. After the integration of New York's Brooklyn district, the tax had more than doubled compared to before, and an intelligence network covering the entire New York state was being built. Especially the infiltration and control of the ordinary people's world. It was more serious than any counselor's time. Even a single word from him could easily influence the outcome of a mayor or governor's election. The reason was simple. Zhang Cheng was not a group of people who flaunted their superiority. He understood how fast the ordinary people's world's technological development was, and all kinds of terrifying destructive weapons were emerging. If he could secretly control the nuclear button in his hand, it would be a good trump card, even in the face of those gods who woke up from their slumber in the future. Of course, this was not an easy task. The Pullman's almost flawless memory modification ability was the key to this. Looking at the guy who still maintained his identity as a lawyer, Zhang Cheng nodded slightly. "Okay, I got it. Also, is there any problem with his memory? I don't want to experience the embarrassment of being exposed in front of others." "No problem. I modified it a few months ago." The Pullman gave a guarantee without hesitation. "Then let's put this matter to rest. Next, let's talk about the vampire slave trade. Tell me, how many counselors have agreed to our proposal, and what are their conditions?" Zhang Cheng crossed his arms on the table, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Upon hearing this, the Pullman subconsciously shuddered. He lowered his voice and replied, "According to your request, I have already contacted 8 members of the Supreme Council, and most of them have agreed to cooperate. As for the requirements, it's naturally a variety of high-grade potions. 3 of the counselors specifically mentioned longevity potions." It was just as I had expected. "Agreed to their request, and I will give you some potions as a deposit later. Remember, I don't want trash created through the embrace. I want pure-blooded nobles born through the union of dark rituals." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and sneered. Obviously, as Succubus Ren began to try to cultivate an army of shadow warlocks, she naturally needed more test subjects. In order to ensure the combat power of the spellcaster army, he did not mind imitating the Europeans of the past and selling black slaves, using the entire vampire community as a hunting target. Of course, all of this would be done in secret. Other than a few parties involved, no one else would know. Anyway, the vampires did not have much of a say in the underworld. As long as they were not pushed too hard, they would not dare to risk being besieged and start a rebellion. "Understood, but I don't know much about the vampire bloodline. You will need to send me a helper," the Pullman straightforwardly requested. "Sure, I will let Shamir and her companions assist you later. Don't worry, if anyone dares to lay a hand on you, I will let them taste blood and death." Without a doubt, Zhang Qing knew how dangerous it was to sell vampire slaves, but he had no intention of backing down. In fact, if it was not for the fact that the evolutionary potion had not been perfected, he would have found a war-torn region, such as the Middle East or Africa, and directly used the potion to allow ordinary people to endure the violent and twisted power of the dark energy and build a new burning legion with hundreds of millions of soldiers. Thank you very much. I swear, no matter what plans you have in the future, I will not hesitate to follow in your footsteps. The Pullman placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. He was not a fool. He knew that the powerful young man in front of him was abandoning the council system and secretly building an army that was completely loyal to him. What was an army for? Of course, it was to start a war. It was foreseeable that when this army had grown to a certain extent, it would not continue to remain silent. Instead, it would start a bloody war that could overthrow the current system of the underworld. Loyalty is a precious quality. If you can maintain your current state, I guarantee that you will receive unimaginable rewards in the end. Go to your work and call Urban Best for me. After saying that, Zhang Cheng raised his arm and waved his hand. The Pullman did not say anything. He bowed slightly and immediately turned to open the door and walked out. Approximately 5 minutes later, Urban Best pushed the door open and walked in. With a smile on his face, he teased, "What is it? Do you have another good prey like the Vampire Duke for me?" Admiring the extreme thirst for blood and slaughter in the other's eyes, Zhang Cheng lightly shook his head. "No. I hope that you can make a trip to Europe and deliver a few letters for me, then create a little chaos." "Oh, can you elaborate?" Arabin's face was filled with surprise. "It's very simple. I hope that the trade of vampire slaves can be launched on a global scale at the same time. As everyone knows, Europe is the birthplace and headquarters of vampires. How can we give up on such a good source of goods? What you need to do is to send my goodwill to a few European Council members, then create some friction and make the residents of the underworld hostile to vampires." Zhang Cheng explained calmly. "I see, I think I understand." Arabin nodded thoughtfully. "Don't go overboard. If you really provoke those old monsters, you can ask Council Member Johann for protection." Zhang Cheng reminded him one last time. He believed that with Faust's strength, it should be more than enough to protect his subordinates. Arabin greedily licked his lips. Hee. You know, I like excitement and challenges. Only the feeling of brushing shoulders with death and piercing the heart of a powerful enemy can give me an unprecedented satisfaction. Hunting in an unfamiliar environment. This is the true test of a hunter's and assassin's skills. Zhang Cheng rolled his eyes in annoyance. "Be careful. Don't die. I don't want to cross the Atlantic Ocean to avenge you." "Die? No. How can I die? I am the messenger of death and fear to my enemies." Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile reading website. Chapter 594. After finalizing the acquisition of the vampire slaves, Zhang Cheng had a sumptuous lunch. Immediately afterwards, he began to deal with the various trivial matters in New York, especially the approval of those who had taken the initiative to join him and met the basic requirements to be given the title of feudal lord. After all, the ruling system set up by the council could only operate well when the territories were divided. The feudal lords would be responsible for handling all kinds of emergencies and troubles instead of doing everything themselves. That alone wasted at least 3.5 hours. In addition, he also had to review the huge amount of taxes. New York was one of the 3 wealthiest states in the United States. The gold dinars collected every month alone exceeded 60,000, half of which had to be handed over to the Supreme Council, and the remaining half was up to the councilors to use at will. As for the USD, it was even more so. The legal part of it was as high as $2,670 million a month, not to mention the illegal part. The bundles of green banknotes alone were enough to fill an entire warehouse. Fortunately, while becoming a counselor of the Supreme Council, Zhang Cheng also inherited the huge money laundering system of the entire underground world. There were even several well-known banks in the United States that were first established specifically to launder money for the counselors and feudal lords. Otherwise, Tracy probably wouldn't have been able to launder even 1/10 of the money even if he worked himself to death. After a series of complicated and tedious operations, the money would be deposited in hundreds of thousands or even millions of accounts registered with false information. When the time came, the payment would be completed by entering the corresponding account password. Due to the fact that the funds were scattered and not connected to each other, even if the government found out, they would at most lose tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. There was no need to worry about the huge amount of funds being frozen all at once. Of course, as a person who preferred to spend time on research and learning, it wasn't that he didn't want to leave all these troublesome work to his subordinates, but that Tracy was still too inexperienced. He simply couldn't manage the huge assets that were increasing every month like a real professional. However, this situation should improve immediately after a professional team was established. Unfortunately, he still had to solve these troublesome matters personally, especially the part that had to be handed over to the Supreme Council. He couldn't delay it even for a single day. After all, the order and rule of the underground world relied on these wealth to operate. For example, if a feudal lord wanted someone to do something for him, he would have to pay the corresponding remuneration. By the same logic, when the counselors recruited the feudal lords to deal with their enemies, they would also need to pay them sufficient remuneration. It was not as if they could make their subordinates work for them willingly just by talking. It should be noted that even though Zhang Cheng was severely understaffed, the salary he paid to the more than 200 knights directly under him was more than 150 million US dollars per month, and this was not including the additional expenses incurred during emergency mobilization. By the time he was done, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening and the sky was completely dark. He didn't stay for long. He quickly left the building and drove back to the Long Island villa. Just as he pushed open the door and entered the living room, he suddenly heard a faint noise coming from upstairs, as well as unbridled laughter. Ha ha! Do you still remember the expression on Nanny's face when she saw us get into the sports car? It's simply too wonderful. That's right. I can guarantee that she won't even have the courage to come to school tomorrow. Well done, Elizabeth. From this day forward, you are the queen of St. Jonas High School. Whoever dares to go against you is going against all of us. For friendship. Cheers. Cheers. Hearing these almost childish remarks, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but sigh. He immediately realized that Elizabeth must have brought her friends who used to live in the poor neighborhood back home. But he didn't plan to disturb the gathering of these young boys and girls. After all, who didn't have a frivolous time when they were young? Not to mention that these guys only drank beer, champagne, and red wine with low alcohol content. They didn't take any narcotics that were extremely harmful to the body. Let them be. But before Zhang Cheng could change out his clothes, a drunk fat girl suddenly appeared at the corner of the second floor and yelled, "Elizabeth, your boyfriend is back." She yelled. All of a sudden, 7 or 8 young students around 16 or 17 years old ran out from the reception room on the second floor. There were white people, black people, and even a Latino. The only thing they had in common was that they all drank a lot, and their steps were a bit unsteady. "Oh my God, when did you come back?" Elizabeth, whose face was red, suddenly trembled. She was like a little girl who had done something wrong and was waiting for her parents to criticize her. She quickly ran down. "I just came back. How's your first day at school?" Zhang Cheng took out his handkerchief and wiped the wine stains on the girl's chest. Not bad. Sorry, I didn't ask for your permission to bring them back," Elizabeth replied in a low voice. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. "No, it's nothing. As long as you're happy. Also, isn't it a bit boring to entertain guests with just drinking? Maybe I should make a call and throw a party." "A party?" Elizabeth widened her eyes in surprise. She couldn't believe that this sentence came from her boyfriend's mouth. She knew very well how much Zhang Cheng hated noisy atmosphere, especially the party in the concept of most Americans. It had always been regarded as mental pollution and utter garbage. "Yes. Why, you don't like it?" Zhang Cheng took out his cell phone and dialed the office number of the manager on duty at Violet House. After about a few seconds, the voice of a middle-aged man came from the other side. "Hello? Boss, what can I do for you?" "I'm going to throw a party at my house. Make the atmosphere lively. Can you handle it?" Zhang Cheng asked bluntly. Of course. Absolutely no problem. This is our business scope. The manager gave a definite answer without hesitation. Very good. Hurry up. I'll wait for you. After that, Zhang Cheng quickly hung up the phone. Oh my God. Throwing a party at a luxurious villa? This idea is awesome. A black young man who didn't know what was going on jumped up excitedly. Oh yeah, we can have a good time tonight. Another young girl with short black hair also waved her fist excitedly. After a while, these young people began to sing and dance. They rushed into the garden crazily, looking forward to the arrival of the motorcade. Only Elizabeth frowned and carefully probed. Why are you doing this? You don't like it. It's nothing. I'm just trying to fit in with normal life. That's all. Moreover, I don't want you to embarrass yourself in front of your friends, Zhang Cheng whispered into the girl's ear. Thank you. Elizabeth blushed. No need to thank me. As a price, I hope that you can wear that set of clothes again on a certain day next month. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 595. 4 American high school students. Parties mint alcohol, handsome men, beautiful women, seductive sexual hints, unbridled venting, and some narcotics that could make them happy. Although Zhang Cheng did not satisfy their expectations for the last one, he did not leave out any of the previous ones. Accompanied by the rhythmic music, more than 60 young men and women played until 2:30 in the morning. Only then did they board the bus reluctantly and return to their respective homes and mothers. If nothing went wrong, those little fellows who were so drunk that they did not even know who they were would probably have a headache for the whole day tomorrow. After everyone left, Zhang Cheng immediately ordered the invisible servant to tidy up the house from top to bottom. Then, he took a hot bath with Elizabeth, who was also a little drunk, and sent her back to the bedroom. He quietly took out the parchment and teleported to the mysterious space where the tower was. Welcome, Master. Rosen is at your service. The metal golem guarding the door bent its heavy body and bowed. Rosen, tell me, do you feel lonely? Zhang Cheng asked with interest. The golem hesitated for a few seconds and quickly nodded. Yes, Master. I feel lonely. If possible, I hope you can allow me to raise some small animals or magical creatures here. Of course, when I'm not around, you can use the resources and space here as you wish. Zhang Cheng gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. Since absorbing the core of the fragment world, the natural environment here had expanded to more than 10 kilometers. Occasionally, it would drizzle, enough to form a complete ecosystem. Of course, more importantly, he was very interested in this intelligent golem. Although Faron continent had very perfect technology to create golems, there are not many people who could really create golems with independent thoughts, personalities, and even souls. More than half of them relied on the famous wishing spell. They did not know which gods, demon lords, or demon dukes helped them. It could not be said that they had mastered the mystery of creating life. However, Rosen was different. It was obviously created in this place, and the wishing spell could not take effect here. This also meant that Rosen's former creator had also obtained the power given by the creator, and his research was more thorough. Thank you very much. I promise that the next time you come back, this place will become a beautiful world. The metal golem waved its thick arms, and its tone revealed a strong sense of excitement and joy. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. It's nothing. You're welcome. In addition, I will be reading all the books on the first floor in the next few days. Do not disturb me unless necessary. Understood. Without saying a word, Rosen immediately took heavy steps and ran towards the pool not far away. It seemed that he was planning to use part of the tower's ability to create some simple small animals, such as fish and birds. Ignoring the somewhat unusual metal golem, Zhang Cheng went straight into the tower and began to flip through the books on the shelves one by one. Judging from the different languages on the books, these books were obviously collected and compiled from different worlds. There were even a few books that were alchemy and enchantment teaching materials from the magic kingdom of Dalaran. Apart from that, there were also a few notes and handbooks left behind by the machinists of the Amasketh Empire, one of the 2 magical civilizations created by humans in the Faron continent. Although there was not much content, it provided some very interesting ideas, especially the part about how to give mechanical constructs intelligence, life, and soul. It was simply an eye-opener. He could not help but think that if he could combine the Burning Legion's technology with the Netheril civilization's recycling of magical energy, coupled with the unparalleled creativity of the Amasketh machinists, would he be able to create a huge legion that was truly inexhaustible? Of course, it was still a bit far from being able to do that with just a few messy handbooks and notes. However, he had an unparalleled advantage, which was that he could go to other worlds and use the resources of others to conduct his own experiments. Simply put, he was borrowing the chicken that laid the eggs. He believed that Illidan's Storm Rage, whose mind was filled with the flames of revenge against the Burning Legion, would not mind having a loyal army of constructs that would never betray her. For 3 days in a row, with the help of the great power given by the divinity, Zhangqing read more than 700 books on the first floor without any sleep or rest. He firmly memorized the formulas and knowledge inside. After doing all this, he did not hesitate to go through the portal to the world of Azeroth, and once again descended on this mysterious planet surrounded by countless mysterious forces. However, before he could take a look at the surrounding environment, he immediately saw a burly ogre rushing towards him, drooling and laughing wildly. Ah ha ha! Human! Meat! Mager is hungry! Mager is going to eat you! Sigh! I hate meeting brainless idiots. Zhang Cheng sighed helplessly and immediately forced the mind control ability into the ogre's brain. In less than 2 or 3 seconds, the ogre who called himself Mager staggered and fell into a state of confusion. After about half a minute, the chaotic memories and thoughts in his mind finally became clear. He approached Soren and respectfully prostrated himself on the ground and shouted, "Supreme Great Master, your loyal servant listens to your orders." There was no need to ask to know that this unlucky ogre had been controlled by the mind control ability. It was as simple as a mind flayer controlling a slave. After all, the ogres in the world of Azeroth were not a race known for their intelligence. Perhaps a small number of warlocks and wizards were smarter and more cunning, but ordinary ogres were basically no different from mentally retarded children. Their minds were filled with primitive desires like eating, sleeping, and fighting. Looking at the ogre kneeling in front of him, Zhang Cheng could not help but shake his head and ask, "Mager, tell me, where is this place?" "Master, this is Dustwallow Marsh. Not far from here is Brackenwall Village." The ogre raised his head and pointed behind him. "Dustwallow Marsh? Brackenwall Village? So you're from the Stonemer tribe?" Zhang Cheng roughly searched his memories and quickly confirmed the ogre's identity. After all, Dustwallow Marsh was one of the nests of the Black Dragon army. Including the Black Dragon Princess, many young black dragons, Dragonborn, and young dragons used the complex terrain of the marsh to reproduce and try to regain their former glory. Therefore, apart from Theramore Island, which was protected by Jaina, there was only the Stonemer ogres left. However, he did not know if Brackenwall Village was ruled by the original Stonemer ogre leader, or if it had been taken over by Lexa and became a member of the tribe. If it was the latter, then naturally there was no need to say anything and just leave. If it was the former, then he did not mind using these 1,000 ogres for a small experiment. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful book mobile version website.com. Chapter 596. Brackenwall Village, an ogre settlement that stood in the northwestern direction of the Dust and Mud, was undergoing a cruel ordeal. Large numbers of black dragonborn and young dragons charged out of the swamp in an attempt to eliminate all these potential threats. Some of them were powerful spellcasters who could easily shoot out lethal fireballs, while others were outstanding warriors. They relied on the great strength of their dragon bloodline and the defensive power of their scales to kill the ogres in the periphery one by one. In the blink of an eye, a dozen ogres had fallen unconscious in pools of blood. There was no doubt that these Stonemer ogres who had followed Gul'dan out to sea in search of Sargera's tomb no longer had the fearsome aura they once had. All that was left was an extreme desire for survival. It was important to note that they had abandoned the town they had built in the south of the swamp to avoid the slaughter of the black dragons. Who would have thought that the black dragons would not let them go even after running so far away? After all, compared to Theramore, who was guarded by a powerful wizard, the ogres of Brackenwall Village were no pushovers. Damn it! Block the gap. Don't let those dragonborn rush in. Mog Mullock roared as he waved his sandbag-sized fists. Ever since the Beast King Lexa had killed Kogel, he had appointed him as the king of the Stonemer clan. This huge fatty was the supreme king of the entire clan. Unless someone defeated him in a challenge, no one could disobey his orders. No, there are too many enemies. And they have dragons. Another ogre pointed at the young black dragons that were diving down from the sky. But just as he finished speaking, a lethal attack descended from the sky, burning 3 or 4 unlucky ogres to death. Due to the rich fat content under the ogres' bloated bodies, it was easy for them to trigger a chain reaction when they were attacked by high-temperature flames. Some extreme cases even burned themselves into charred corpses. No, the Stonemer clan cannot retreat any further. Go, show those hateful black dragons what we're made of. Mog Mullock roared as he swung his spiked gauntlets and smashed them on the head of a black dragonborn that had charged in. The latter obviously did not expect such a fast and accurate attack, and was knocked to the ground with a bang. When the other ogres saw this, they immediately raised their war hammers, axes, wooden clubs, and other heavy weapons, turning the Dragonians into meat paste in a few hits. Unfortunately, this small victory was not enough to turn the tide of the battle. With their advantage in the air, the young black dragons set the entire Fernwall village ablaze in the blink of an eye. There was a sea of fire everywhere. Just as Mog Mullock was about to give the order to retreat, a black cloud suddenly shrouded the sky. Before either side could react to what had happened, terrifying icicles fell from the sky. Puff, 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 a spellcaster. Retreat, retreat. As screams echoed in the air above the battlefield, large numbers of dragonborn, dragon whelps, and dragon younglings that could not dodge in time were pierced by the solid ice with great inertia. Crimson blood splattered everywhere. In less than 5 minutes, half of the black dragons that had participated in the siege of Fernwall Village had lost their precious lives. The remaining black dragons could not care about anything else as they turned and ran towards the swamp. They were not fools. They knew how powerful a spellcaster that could cast such a large-scale destructive spell was. He was not someone they could deal with. Zhang Cheng took a deep breath as he sensed the lingering chill and the thick stench of blood in the air. He stepped on the corpse of a young black dragon and walked up to Mog Mullock. He spoke in the slightly shaky language of the orcs. "I challenge you." "What?" The ogre leader's eyes widened, a trace of undetectable fear flashing through them. He could not help but be terrified. He was not brainless like his fellow ogres. He knew that the spell was very likely cast by this insignificant human in front of him. To be able to control arcane spells to such an extent, he was definitely a human magician. Just like Jaina Proudmoore of Theramore, he was no match for him. "I said, I challenge you." According to the tradition of the ogres, you either accept the challenge or surrender your ruling rights. Don't try any tricks, or I won't mind letting the icicles fall on your heads. Zhang Cheng threatened with a half-smile. Through his conversation with Maegr, he learned that the Stonemer clan had been conquered by Lexa and became a member of the Horde. However, Orgrimmar had not sent anyone to establish a fixed connection with this place. Therefore, even if all the ogres disappeared, it would not cause a war between the Alliance and the Horde. After all, the Black Dragon Princess Onyxia and her army would be the scapegoats. Sensing the killing intent in Leyland's eyes, Mog Mullock subconsciously swallowed his saliva and explained through gritted teeth, "No, I can't do that. Lexa will kill me. Don't worry about Lexa. He won't know what happened here. Moreover, I will bestow power upon you and your subordinates. Unparalleled power. Of course, the prerequisite is that you have to kneel at my feet and call me master, just like him." With that, Zhang Cheng turned and waved at the back of the forest. A tall two-headed ogre spellcaster slowly walked out of the damp swamp. The left head laughed sinisterly and shouted, Mager, become even stronger. Mager, master the power of magic. The right head was not to be outdone. It raised its right hand and unleashed a scorching fireball. There was no doubt that with the help of the evolutionary potion, the originally stupid fatty had completed the transformation of his life form and become a two-headed spellcaster among the ogres. In particular, the sturdy dark brown stratum corneum covering the surface of his skin was 40 to 50% similar to that of the Draenor world's Moundgoran. His body was also about twice the size of his own kind. Mager? How did you become like this? After recognizing the identity of the newcomer, Mog Mullock fell into a daze. Great Master, grant us power. Yes, although painful, but powerful. Now choose. Submit, or die. The two heads of Mager and Mager cracked open their mouths, and a cruel and bloodthirsty expression appeared on their sinister faces. With the help of the evolutionary potion, the two of them had not only gained the ability to cast spells, but also recovered a part of their Moundgoran bloodline. Hence, their personalities had also changed greatly. After all, legend had it that the first ogres originated from the powerful bloodline of the Gorons. The potion's power helped to restore a part of their primitive bloodline, and, at the same time, it also included their vicious and brutal nature. Chapter 597. There is no doubt that the ogres were never die-hard loyalists, nor would they sacrifice their lives for the sake of so-called freedom, ideals, responsibility, or mission. To them, as long as they could fill their stomachs, it wasn't worth paying too much attention to who they worked for, even if it meant becoming a slave. Of course, it wasn't easy to control these violent, cruel, and bloodthirsty fellows that were over 3 meters tall. Especially when they thought that their leader or master had become weak, they would definitely choose to betray them, or even stab them in the back. However, Zhang Cheng, who was adept at disintegration, easily found a way to solve this small problem. That was to choose 60 ogres from the 800 to consume the evolving potion, turning them into powerful spellcasters or warriors, and reconstruct the pyramid-shaped internal management structure. This way, the ogres who had awakened the Goron bloodline would naturally become the upper class of the Stonemer clan, using their greater strength to force the ordinary ogres to submit to them. At the same time, the ordinary ogres would gradually become estranged from their powerful brethren. After all, the former would gain unimaginable power and enjoy all sorts of privileges, while the latter could only obey the former forever. It wouldn't take long for a true class conflict to form. As for Zhang Cheng himself, as long as he firmly controlled the few ogres who consumed the evolving potion, he would be able to control the Stonemer ogres forever. It took him 3 days to complete the military reorganization and management of more than 800 ogres. Only then did he order them to set off for the Dragon Swamp in the south. He planned to visit Onyxia's lair and see if the Black Dragon Princess had been exposed by Marshal Reginald Windsor and driven out of Stormwind City. If she had really been chased out, then it would be a blockbuster. Onyxia was a direct descendant of the Black Dragon King, Nisario. At the same time, apart from her mother, Sinestra, she was the only female black dragon in the Black Dragon army who could lay a large number of eggs. Whoever obtained her would have the loyalty of the entire Black Dragon army. Furthermore, Zhang Cheng didn't mind trying to breed and fuse the strengths of dragons from different worlds to create a new species of dragons. This army of ogres was filled with malice as they traversed the swamp. Whether it was crocodiles, giant spiders, or wind snakes, all of them became their food. However, this unbridled style immediately became cautious after entering the dragon swamp. This was because groups of dragonborn and young dragons would often appear here. Occasionally, there would even be robust, young black dragons flying in the sky. Even the ogres would become food for the Black Dragon army if they weren't careful. Mogmerlock, how far are we from the place you mentioned? Zhang Cheng asked loudly as he lay on a wooden chair carried by 2 ogres. Master, we're at most 10 kilometers. We're almost there. Mogmullock hurriedly ran over and replied with a fawning expression. It couldn't be helped. Even the ordinary ogres, he's of us were the most of their attention. Even the ordinary ogres of his. Even the ordinary ogres of the yours began to think that he, in order to preserve his position and his life, the only thing he could do was try his best to curry favor with this human mage who possessed powerful arcane powers. Oh, does that mean we're not far from the Black Dragon lair? Zhang Cheng ignored the ogre's cautious attitude and stroked the stubble on his chin. His impression of Onyxia wasn't the kind of weakling who would obediently hide in her lair after being bullied at her doorstep. On the contrary, the Black Dragon Princess was an ambitious primordial beast filled with contempt for humans. Normally, when so many ogres were approaching her lair, she would have jumped out and rewarded the enemies with a deep breath. Mogmerlock obviously didn't notice what this abnormal situation meant. He continued to flatter Leylin. Those cowardly black dragons must have known of your strength, Master. That's why they've all gone into hiding. Perhaps it won't be long before you become the supreme king of Dustwallow Swamp. Shut up. Zhang Cheng rolled his eyes in annoyance. King of Dustwallow Swamp? Only an idiot would want to be king in this godforsaken place. After all, including Theramore's alliance and the Black Dragon army, there were no more than 50,000 to 100,000 intelligent life forms here. It couldn't even compare to the more densely populated counties on Earth, and the climate was abnormally harsh. Only an idiot would waste time and energy here. Just as he was considering if he should capture a dragon whelp or a dragonborn to send a message to Onyxia, a large patch of dark clouds suddenly appeared in the distant sky. No, it wasn't a black cloud. It was a massive black dragon. Although it wasn't 100 meters long, it was at least 50 to 60 meters long. The sharp horns on its head and the bone spikes on its back gave off a sinister and terrifying feeling. Ah, our beloved princess is finally willing to show herself. All of you, retreat into the forest. This place might turn into a sea of fire. Zhang Cheng waved his hand, indicating for all the ogres to leave. He didn't want half of his precious experiment material to be burned to death by a deep breath. Master, why don't you let us join the battle? It's just a black dragon. We can tear it to shreds. An ogre warrior over 6 meters tall, with a body covered in gray-brown cuticles, licked his lips and asked with a bloodthirsty expression. There was no doubt that Galen's innate wariness was flowing through his veins at this moment. No, she's my prey. My goal is not to kill her, but to capture her. Do you understand? Zhang Cheng turned around, a golden light flashing in his eyes. The ogre warrior seemed to have been stimulated by something external and subconsciously shivered. He hurriedly lowered his head and replied, "Understood, great master." With the powerful control of his psionic ability, the ogres of the Stonemer clan hid in the depths of the damp swamp in the blink of an eye. Not long after they left, the Black Dragon Princess' huge body descended from the sky. She opened her mouth full of sharp teeth and roared, "Lowly human, you dare to invade my territory. You killed my people. Now, are you prepared to face my wrath?" "Ayaya, dear Countess Katrana Prester, have you forgotten me?" Zhang Cheng stood up from his chair and bowed elegantly with one hand on his chest. It's you." Onyxia, who had calmed down, finally recalled this familiar-looking young human in front of her. Her pale yellow eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful book mobile version website.com. Chapter 598. That's right. It's me. I'm very sorry for entering your territory without an invitation. But I'm a little curious. What's with the power of the holy light that's surging in your body? Don't tell me that after staying in Stormwind City for so long, you've also begun to believe in the path of the holy light? Zhang Cheng looked at her with great interest, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and a meaningful smile appeared on his face. The reason was simple. The Black Dragon Princess was injured. A powerful power of the holy light was raging in her huge body. If it weren't for the unparalleled vitality and magic resistance of adult dragons, her internal organs would have been torn to pieces by the power of the holy light. Obviously, there were only a handful of people in Azeroth who could do this. Combined with the situation in Stormwind City, if it wasn't Archbishop Benedictus, it could only be the regent, Bolvar for dragon. As the direct descendant of the Black Dragon King, Onyxia's temper had always been bad. After hearing these words, full of ridicule and sarcasm, she immediately roared, "Shut your stinky mouth immediately. If you don't want to die, don't think that just because you have Nefarian's protection, you can really be on equal footing with the noble black dragons. In my eyes, you're just a lowly servant." "Ha ha! Servant? Your Highness, it seems that compared to your arrogant brother, your vision is really not that good. Don't tell me you haven't noticed. Between the two of us, you're the weak one." As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng unreservedly released the surging magic power in his body, as well as the divinity that could allow mortals to transcend their limits. In just a few seconds, the area within a radius of more than 200 meters was under the control of this incomparably powerful force, constantly transforming between energy and matter. Soil, plants, air, water, everything was like a legend, forming a large area of wondrous domain. In the domain, everything could be controlled, changed, and even created out of thin air. There is no doubt that through continuous learning and summarization, he had already integrated many abilities such as arcane magic, alchemy, and divinity together. Perhaps on the surface it was still a little messy and a little rough, but it was undoubtedly a good start. Feeling the terrifying energy around her that was enough to tear her apart, Onyxia didn't act rashly. Instead, she stared at him and carefully asked, "Who are you? What do you want?" After all, she wasn't an idiot. She was the mastermind behind the huge political conspiracy in the Stormwind Kingdom, and knew that she should put away the so-called majesty of a dragon when she was at a disadvantage. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. "Who I am is not important. What I'm going to do with you. My dear princess, from now on, you are my slave and reproductive tool." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The Dragon Covenant of the Dragon Alliance. Crow Kelba's huge body immediately passed through the planar passage and once again descended upon the mysterious planet of Azeroth. The dragon's dragon. S is the dragons. It's this. With the infusion of divinity, he was no longer one of the beast-like creatures in the Song of Ice and Fire. His body radiated the light of wisdom and arcane magic. This was especially true for the beautiful violet scales on the surface of its body. Every single one of them had strange symbols and patterns on them. When arcane magic passed through, the runes and patterns would produce incredible phenomena. Some would shoot out flames, some would release electricity, and some would freeze into solid ice. Needless to say, under the influence of divinity, he was evolving towards a higher form of life. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before a whole new race of dragons appeared in the world. "Bastard! You! How dare you!" Onyxia was shocked and angry when she saw this scene. After all, her father and brother had always been trying to create a new race of dragons to help them conquer or destroy the world of Azeroth. As such, she was no stranger to man-made dragons. She could feel the terrifying power and potential in the dragon in front of her. Why wouldn't I dare? Compared to the ambitious Nefarian, I'm closer to a pure scholar. I don't plan to destroy the world, nor do I plan to conquer the world. I just want to collect some interesting knowledge and technology. Oh, right, I almost forgot to introduce him. This child is called Kulo Kelba. I created him with my own hands. From today onwards, he's your mate. Zhang Cheng patted Kulo Kelba's huge head and said, "No, I won't give in. Go to hell." The Black Dragon Princess roared and opened her mouth, trying to breathe out a breath that could melt steel. But before the flames could come out of her throat, Zhang Cheng casually raised a finger and said, "Command, intimidate." In an instant, Onyxia felt an invisible force descend from the sky and forcibly take away control of her body. "Kulo, go and mate with this princess. I need her to lay enough eggs." Zhang Cheng ordered without turning his head. "As you wish, father." Kulo Kelba didn't say anything else and directly rode on the Black Dragon Princess. He slowly inserted his thick lower body into the ovulation hole under the female dragon's tail and began to make vigorous movements. After a few minutes, Onyxia finally recovered. She frantically waved her claws and wings and resisted. "Go away! Get off my body! I'm going to kill you all!" But regrettably, not only did this kind of resistance not help him get rid of his shameful posture, but it also aroused the innate desire of the male giant dragon, Kelba. He used the powerful strength brought about by his divinity to subdue the other party in just a few moves. Zhang Cheng saw this scene and immediately laughed and teased. "My dear princess, resist as much as you can while you still have the strength, because not long after, you'll lose the desire to resist and completely become a pathetic reproductive tool. You might even enjoy such a life." "No, I won't give in. Despicable human. You'll pay for your actions today. The price of blood and life." Onyxia clenched her teeth and let out a roar of grief and indignation. She couldn't believe that as the only daughter of the Black Dragon King Nesario, there would be a day when she would be forced to mate. "Price, I'm sorry. Perhaps your great father has the ability to do so, but he's busy destroying the world and has no time to care about you. As for your elder brother, I will pay him a personal visit soon and use his flesh and soul to forge a powerful magic item." As he said this, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a strong desire to kill and destroy. Anyway, the Black Dragons of Azeroth had no human rights. No matter how he killed or abused them, the other 4 dragon aspects wouldn't stand up for him. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 599. It had to be said that even though the Dust Wallow Swamp was a hot, humid place filled with all sorts of poisonous gases, Zhang Cheng was starting to like this place after staying here for a month. The reason was simple. Firstly, this place was isolated from the rest of the world. There was no need to worry about the cruel experiments being carried out being discovered by other mysterious people. Secondly, the depths of the marsh were rich in resources. Whether it was loaches, murlocs, crocodiles, velociraptors, and giant spiders, they were all good sources of food, especially for black dragons and ogres who were not so picky about food. Lastly, and most importantly, there were thousands of unhatched dragon eggs in Onyxia's nest. Zhang Cheng tried to infuse some of them with dark energy, some with shadow, and some with the power of alchemy and creation to form a huge cocoon. As for what could be hatched, even he was not sure. After all, experiments were full of uncertainties. Furthermore, the source of the Black Dragon's bloodline had been contaminated by the ancient gods, so no matter how ridiculous the situation was, it was normal. Apart from that, after a month of repeated ravaging, the Black Dragon Princess finally gave birth to the first batch of dragon eggs that she and Kelba were incubating together. Compared to ordinary black dragon eggs, the scales on the surface of these dragon eggs were a brilliant violet. Moreover, one could see the changes in arcane energy and the hatchlings within the dragon eggs through the crystal-like scales. Once a spell was cast nearby, close to a third of the magic energy would be absorbed by the dragon eggs. There was no doubt that these eggs had inherited Kelba's unique ability to devour magic, which allowed them to absorb energy from the surrounding environment to grow rapidly. It was important to note that Azeroth was a planet full of magical energy. Therefore, in just 2 weeks, the first dragon hatched from its shell and let out a loud and clear cry. "Roar! This is my child." Kelba came closer and looked curiously at the little fellow that was only a few centimeters long. Although it was a full-grown dragon from a biological point of view, it was still very young. It was only about 2 years old and did not understand the meaning of reproduction. "That's right. How is it? Do you have a special feeling of being connected by blood?" Zhang Cheng asked as he carefully grabbed the baby dragon and observed it carefully. Kelba shook his head lightly. "No, I don't feel anything special. Father, I don't understand. Why are they so weak? Was it the same when I was born?" Of course, any newborn baby is much weaker than their parents. However, I believe that with the passage of time, they will one day be as strong as you. After saying that, Zhang Cheng let go of the little fellow in his hand, allowing it to fly around freely in the cave. There was no doubt that this baby dragon was very healthy and had perfectly inherited the advantages of its parents' bloodline. The next step was to see if its growth rate would be as fast as expected. After all, he did not have the time to spend hundreds or even thousands of years waiting for a purebred black dragon to slowly mature. To be more precise, in his eyes, the dragons in the world of the Song of Ice and Fire, which could quickly become powerful in 1 or 2 years, were the ideal biological weapons that were truly suitable for mass production and deployment on the battlefield. Of course, these immature dragons were slightly weak. It would be best if they could be infused with some powerful magic. Zhang Cheng was very much looking forward to Kulo Kelba and Onyxia's dragon eggs, perfectly inheriting this gene and becoming an indispensable part of the army in the future. Just as he was about to take a look at the giant cocoon, Mog Mullock suddenly rushed in and shouted while panting, "Master, those bloodsail pirates, they agreed to your conditions." "Oh, they agreed?" Zhang Cheng's face was filled with incomparable surprise. After all, what he proposed was not a normal cooperation or employment plan, but a joint attack on the Booty Gulf and control this strategic location at the southernmost tip of the eastern continent. Normally, such a large-scale operation would involve the interests of many parties, especially when the Blackwater Pirates, who had the support of the Goblin Financial Group, were protecting the waters. If both parties were to launch an all-out attack, it would definitely cause a considerable amount of chaos. Yes, they agreed. However, they want you to meet them at the beach southwest of the swamp at night. Mog Mullock nervously added, "Very good. Give the order to the Stonemer clan and immediately set off for the designated location. Remember, you must give them a memorable meeting. Also, I don't like fishmen at all, so clean them up in advance." Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and ordered. In any case, in the desolate continent of Kalimdor, there were not many forces that had the ability to transport goods across the sea. Among them, the night elves, orcs, and Theramore were naturally unable to have too much contact. The goblins were too greedy, so the bloodsail pirates were the only choice. Furthermore, he was very clear that these bloodthirsty and ferocious fellows were covetously eyeing the rich Booty Gulf. As long as this could be satisfied, they would definitely not be stingy in providing any necessary help, such as transporting more than 800 ogres to the eastern continent. As for whether the goblins in Booty Gulf would suffer heavy casualties or even disappear from the world of Azeroth forever, that was none of Zhang Cheng's business. After all, these green-skinned little things were not liked by the Stormwind Kingdom, and they did not play any important role in future history. Even if they were all killed, there was no need to worry about the bronze dragons causing trouble. Therefore, both sides hit it off. However, the bloodsail pirates did not know that they were working with a dangerous person, and even more so, did not know what kind of ending awaited them. "Understood. Please rest assured, I will take care of this matter well. However, you promised that as long as I deal with the bloodsail pirates, I will obtain great power." Mog Mullock's eyes revealed excitement and anticipation as he lowered his voice to remind Leyland. "Oh, I almost forgot. Here, take it." Zhang Cheng casually tossed over an improved version 3.0 evolution potion. Mog Mullock, who was already impatient, immediately pulled out the stopper and poured it down his throat. In less than a minute, the muscles and bones in his body began to rapidly grow, forming a large layer of grayish-brown cuticle and hair on the surface of his body. For some reason, his two eyes finally fused together. One-eyed, unparalleled upper body strength. His explosive muscles were almost exaggerated. Everything about him made him look very similar to Galnahill. Obviously, as the strongest remaining Stonemer ogre, Mog Mullock's atavism was higher than any other member. He had almost perfectly recreated the appearance of Galnahill. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful Book Mobile Version.com. Chapter 600. The coastline to the southwest of the Dustwallow Swamp was a famous forbidden zone for ships. Even the most experienced captain would not dare to enter. Not only were there reefs scattered all over the place, but there were also many merfolk, lobstermen, and plesiosaurs. Any one of them would be enough to make a fully armed warship suffer. Of course, there would never be a lack of daring people in this world. The ships that sank in these waters were the best warning to countless captains. But today, a huge warship stealthily avoided the detection of a Theramore lighthouse and stealthily docked in a relatively safe bay under the cover of the night. A human man in his 50s, wearing a blood-red coat, ordered the sailors to lower 3 small boats and sail towards the white beach. Not long after, they successfully landed on land and began to vigilantly patrol the surroundings. About 2 to 3 minutes later, one of the sailors frowned and muttered to himself, "Strange. If I remember correctly, there should be many merfolk and lobstermen here. Why are they gone today? Idiot. Isn't it good that they're gone? Could it be that you want to have a good fight with those stinky monsters?" Another sailor rolled his eyes in annoyance. "No, what I mean is that this is a little abnormal. You have to understand that creatures like merfolk and lobstermen will not easily leave their territory unless they encounter their natural enemies. I feel that there must be something around that they're afraid of." The sailor who spoke before explained nervously, "Captain Phil, I think Duncan's words make sense. We should be careful." A middle-aged man who looked like an adjutant spoke up to remind him. The old man in the blood-red coat stroked the thick beard on his chin and comforted him with a smile. "Don't worry. I know where those pesky merfolk and lobstermen went. This is actually a display of strength by our allies. Am I right?" Just as he finished speaking, he turned around and looked into the depths of the dark forest. Clap, clap, clap. Accompanied by sparse applause, Zhang Qing walked out of the darkness unhurriedly and bowed slightly with one hand on his chest. "Good evening, dear Captain Phil Laren. Or should I call you Fleet Commander?" "Oh, you know me." Phil Laren raised his eyebrows in surprise. After all, it hadn't even been a month since he had been promoted to commander of Stranglethorn Vale by the Bloodsail's upper echelons. Normally, it was impossible for the outside world to know such confidential information. "Of course, I also know that your fleet consists of 3 warships, namely your flagship Red Mist, Captain Naharu's Wavebreaker, and Captain Stivett's Maiden's Luck. Perhaps you won't believe me, but there are very few things in this world that I don't know, especially those important events that can affect the course of the entire world." Zhang Chung smiled and gave the other party a meaningful look. Old Phil, who had experienced several major battles, obviously wouldn't be frightened by such psychological tactics. He teased with a faint smile, "Wow, it seems that you have a good intelligence network in your hands. You can even get our secrets in the first place. Perhaps I should suggest to the commander to clean up the internal department and see if we can find a few traitors and spies." "Up to you." Zhang Chung shrugged nonchalantly, then raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Asterisk pa. Asterisk following the crisp sound. The ogres lying in ambush left the cover of the shadows and surrounded the dozen or so Bloodsail pirates from all directions. Each of them carried 2 or 3 corpses of merfolk and lobstermen, stuffing them into their mouths. Ordinary people would probably vomit if they saw such a bloody scene. What's the meaning of this? Old Phil stared at these monsters from another world with vigilance. He wasn't a naive brat who hadn't seen the world. He understood how terrifying the ogres were in battle. During the war with the orcs, many soldiers who thought they had extraordinary strength would be smashed into meat patties by these silly-looking fatties. Apart from a few exceptionally talented heroes, no one dared to fight the ogres one-on-one. That was no different from courting death. Relax, don't be nervous. I'm only introducing you to the warriors under my command. Think about it. Once they charge into Hidden Treasure Gulf, won't they create enormous psychological pressure on the enemy? Trust me, as long as we work together, taking down Chongbao Gulf won't be a problem. Of course, since we're working together, we have to discuss the conditions first. My condition is that the Bloodsail pirates can take away 2/3 of the goblins' wealth and use it as a supply port. I'll get the remaining third, as well as the rights to rule Hidden Treasure Gulf. How about it? Do you agree? Zhang Cheng pretended to be full of confidence as he laid out his conditions. In reality, as a group of evil pirates, the Bloodsail pirates didn't have much ambition. They didn't plan on occupying a piece of land and establishing their own country. They weren't lions, but a group of sharks and a group of vultures that fed on fresh blood. Thus, it didn't need a so-called territory. As long as they could plunder enough wealth, it didn't matter even if they had to work with the undead and demons. We can get 2/3. Old Phil's eyes shone with a frightening light when he heard this number. After all, the owner of Hidden Treasure Gulf, Moneybags Rivergaz, was one of the best in the Goblin financial group. The wealth he had amassed through trade and the Blackwater pirates was enough to put the financially troubled Stormwind Kingdom to shame. If they could obtain 2/3 of his wealth in one go, even if they had a hand over the majority, the remaining would be enough to support the entire fleet for a few years, or even add a few more good ships. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly sensed the shallow thoughts in the other party's brain. He smiled and nodded. Yes, you could take 2/3. But the prerequisite is that you can engage in large-scale slaughter and destruction in Hidden Treasure Gulf, especially setting it on fire. I need a complete city, not ruins. Deal. But you also have to ensure that these big guys participate in the battle. We have to lure the Blackwater Pirates' fleet out and annihilate them before we can attack Hidden Treasure Gulf. Old Phil cast his gaze at the large ogres around him. He could almost see the Bloodsail Pirates' old enemies panicking when they encountered these terrifying monsters. No problem. You're an expert in naval warfare. My men and I will completely obey your orders. Seeing that they had reached an agreement and could finally leave this godforsaken place, Zhang Cheng immediately expressed great goodwill. Over the next hour, the two of them discussed the sailing route and the number of transport ships. After all, there were over 800 ogres with terrifying appetites. They had to ensure that their stomachs were filled during the long voyage, or else they would kill and eat anything that could be eaten, including the sailors of the Bloodsail Pirates. Chapter 601. There was plenty of sunlight, white beaches, dense tropical forests, trolls with painted faces, and all sorts of strange animals. Ever since they crossed the endless ocean, Old Phil had brought the fleet to the warm and humid tropical waters of Stranglethorn Vale through his skillful navigation skills. Through the clear water, one could even see the colorful shoals of fish and mussels that were larger than several adults bundled together. Feeling the salty sea breeze blowing in his face, the old fleet commander suddenly turned around and said with a smile, "You know what? Stranglethorn Vale is actually a very interesting place. Especially those forest trolls. They still have a very barbaric tradition of eating humans. I used to throw disobedient crew members onto the coast where the trolls frequented and watch them be beaten to death, dismembered, and thrown into large pincers to cook and eat. In Stranglethorn Vale, are there many of these man-eating trolls?" Zhang Cheng asked curiously as he stroked his chin. "There's so many that I can't even count them. In fact, whether it's the Alliance in the north, the Horde in the southwest, or the Goblins in Booty Bay, they can't even compare to a fraction of the trolls. To be precise, the trolls are the true masters of this land." Old Phil gave a rather emotional answer. Although the daily routine of Azeroth was to eat, sleep, and fight trolls, no one could deny that the trolls held an important position in this world. Their numbers were several times more than that of humans. Of course, most of these trolls had yet to coalesce into a single force or establish a powerful nation or civilization. They still maintained their primitive tribal system. Otherwise, who would dare to casually bully a group of powerful warriors who possessed powerful regenerative physiques and could activate the violent power in their bloodlines in battle? After all, even the magic kingdom of the High Elves, Quell the Loss, relied on an alliance with humans to barely defeat the forest trolls. Thinking of this, Zhang Cheng suddenly realized that the trolls were the race with the most potential for war on this planet. He immediately asked, "How many trolls do you think there are in Stranglethorn Vale? 200,000? 300,000? Maybe even more. Why are you asking this?" Old Phil shrugged his shoulders. "No, nothing. I'm just a little curious. Don't you find it strange? The trolls clearly have enough strength to expel all outsiders, so why didn't they do so?" A strange light flashed in Zhang Cheng's eyes, and he immediately began to change the topic. "No, there's nothing strange about it. You have to understand that the trolls are divided into many tribes, and there are many conflicts and grudges between them. I know of 3 or 4 tribes that often have wars and conflicts. Sometimes, they're even fiercer to their own people than to outsiders. I would occasionally head to the northern coast to hire some blood-scalp trolls to replenish our lost manpower. I've heard quite a bit about the terrifying traditions of the trolls. Trust me, you'll never want to know. With that, old Phil teased the parrot pet on his shoulder and shouted at the top of his voice, "Full rudder to the left." Taking advantage of the tailwind, we should try to reach the east side of Hidden Treasure Gulf before nightfall. I guarantee that as long as you can do this, everyone will get a large cup of undiluted rum tonight. Rum without water? A big cup. Holy light above. This is the best news I've heard since I set sail. A sailor who was cleaning the deck stood up and cheered loudly. Heavens! The stingy old captain is actually willing to let us drink rum without water? You have to know that this is a treatment that can only be enjoyed before the battle. Another sailor who looked quite old also joined in the commotion. "Ha ha, Captain, this guy's talking bad about you. I suggest that we hang him up in the sun for half a day." "That's right. It's best if we whip him a few more times." Many sailors began to cheer because of this sudden good news. Without a doubt, sailing was a rather boring thing. It was so boring that they had to constantly find things to do in order to stop the fear in their hearts from spreading. Even on Earth, during the age of sail, sailors would be frightened by legends of sea monsters, curses, ghosts, and the like. In more serious cases, it could even lead to serious riots. But what about Azeroth? This was an out-and-out magical world. All kinds of giant sea monsters, Nagas and Murlocs were not just legends, but real things. Not to mention, there was an ancient god in the deep sea, Enzos. It could be said that sailing in such an environment was more than 10 times, or even 100 times more dangerous than on Earth. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as having one's head hanging on one's belt. Even though the Bloodsail pirates were a group of villains who would not shrink from any crime, one had to admit that they did indeed have courage, perseverance that ordinary people could not hope to attain. Listening to the excited human sailors singing the ancient songs of the kingdom of Kurtiras, Zhangchen could not help but smile and sigh. What an interesting group of people, aren't they? Interesting? Is this how you describe a prey that you're toying with in the palm of your hand? A beautiful woman with long black hair sneered at the side. She was none other than the Black Dragon Princess in human form, Onyxia. Due to being imprisoned and humiliated for a long time, her eyes were filled with anger and hatred. If not for the 2 bracelets engraved with imprisonment runes on her hands, she would have transformed into a dragon and directly burned the entire ship to ashes. Don't be so cynical. Did you forget what I said before? Anger and hatred can't solve any problems. They will only weaken your wisdom and judgment. If I were you, I would obediently cooperate with every experiment, even selling my beauty and soul in exchange for a chance to escape. Zhang Cheng raised his hand and unscrupulously stroked her smooth chin and cheeks. You want me to give up my pride and dignity, crawl before you like a dog, and be at your beck and call? Dream on. Onyxia glared fiercely. Even though this position made her feel an intense sense of humiliation, she did not make any excessive movements. The reason was simple. In these days, she had tried to resist too many times and received countless punishments from her body and soul. The most terrifying one was that she almost lost consciousness from pain. Through this, the Black Dragon Princess clearly understood that this seemingly harmless young human in front of her was a person even more terrifying than the demons of the Burning Legion. He was a monster that embraced darkness from his thoughts to his heart, just like her father, Nisario. The only difference was that one of them had gone completely mad and desired to destroy the world, while the other retained a terrifying rationality. He only cared about what he wanted and did not care about whether the world would be destroyed. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website.com. Chapter 602. The night scenery of Stranglethorn Vale was beautiful, especially when paired with the bright moonlight and the crashing of the waves. It was simply a form of enjoyment. After a simple cleanup of the Murlocs and Nagas on the beach, The Bloodsail pirates set up camp in a relatively dry area. A portion of them stayed behind to gather wood for a bonfire, while the rest entered the forest to hunt animals for a change of taste. After all, apart from the ogres, most sailors with normal taste buds craved fresh meat, vegetables, and fruits after eating bread, sausages, bacon, and fish for several weeks. Fortunately, Thornvale, being a tropical rainforest, had no lack of such things. Roughly 2 hours later, the hunting party returned to camp with large amounts of prey. There were common herbivores and large birds, as well as carnivores such as tigers, leopards, and velociraptors. Coupled with a large number of crabs caught on the beach, the dinner could be said to be rather sumptuous. Apart from that, there were also some strangely shaped fruits that could provide large amounts of vitamins and acids for those who had traveled long distances. Of course, one couldn't expect the boorish sailors to cook up any exquisite feast. If they weren't stewing in a pot, they would be roasting on a rack. Roughly half an hour later, a large pot of steaming stew was carried to the largest bonfire. Old Phil scooped a bowl of stew with a spoon and passed it to Zhang Chung. "Have a taste. An authentic jungle hodgepodge. This is a delicacy that can only be eaten in Thornvale." The latter took it and took a small bite. Soon, a strange expression appeared on his face. "You put fruit in it?" "That's right. This is the secret recipe of the Thornvale Expeditionary Force. Back when we were still members of the Alliance, we learned it from a corporal. It's truly delicious." Old Phil scooped a large bowl of stew for himself as he spoke and enjoyed it. Not far behind him, more than 800 hungry ogres could no longer hold back their desire for food. They were wrestling with one another, fighting for the right to be the first to eat. To the ogres, this was a tradition that happened once or twice a day. The pirates were already used to it, and some even placed bets to see who would get the first pot of stew. When Zhang Chung saw this, he shook his head helplessly. He tossed the so-called real delicacy aside and picked up a skewer of barbecued meat. Obviously, this kind of typical Western way of putting fruit and meat together was enough to spoil his appetite. It was already very nice of him not to throw it up and throw it away on the spot. He would never touch it again. Old Phil undoubtedly noticed this. He laughed and asked, "Why? You don't like jungle hodgepodge?" "Yes. Do you know which 2 foods I hate the most? The first one is to add all kinds of sour and sweet fruits to the meat dish. The taste makes me feel disgusted. The second one is to sprinkle lemon juice on the fish." Zhang Chung gave a straightforward answer. Due to his divinity, eating was no longer an energy intake that he had to do every day, so eating had become an interest and enjoyment. Under such preconditions, he would not touch any food that could not bring him enjoyment, let alone some messy dark cuisine. "Ha ha ha. All right, it seems like you're a person with high standards of living. I'm starting to suspect that you're a member of a large family in a kingdom. Don't misunderstand. I have no intention of prying into your privacy, but we have to talk about the plan to attack Booty Bay. You have to understand that those green dwarfs are not easy to deal with. They might not be very strong in battle, but they are proficient in creating all kinds of terrifying explosives. I don't want my ship to be sunk." Old Phil put down his empty bowl, a sinister and cunning glint in his eyes. "Please speak. I'm listening." Zhang Chung swallowed the food in his mouth and raised his arm to make an inviting gesture. "It's very simple. We have to deal with the Blackwater Pirates fleet first. According to what I know, there are 6 large warships in Booty Bay. As long as we deal with them, we can seal off the port and cut off Revagaz from the other goblin cities. Think about it. Without supplies from the outside world, how long can this small city at the southernmost tip of Thornvale last? They won't even be able to provide for themselves. Sinking enemy warships and sealing off the port, Old Phil's way of thinking clearly carried the unique style of the Bloodsail pirates. However, Zhang Chung didn't like this kind of plan that wasted too much time. He smiled and suggested, "No, my friend, you are too cautious. Booty Bay isn't as powerful as you imagine. I believe that a surprise attack and a decapitation operation will be enough to deal with the Blackwater Pirates' control over this region of water." "Surprise attack?" Old Phil subconsciously creased his brows. "I believe you should know that Booty Bay is an easy place to defend but hard to attack. The only entrance on land is a long and narrow cave. Be it wild beasts or forest trolls, they can't force their way into the city. Thus, the goblins have focused their defense on the sea. Apart from their powerful fleet, they have set up many cannons, catapults, and giant crossbows on the city's high ground. But the problem is that all of this defense is like an eggshell. It might seem indestructible, but once we appear directly inside the city, those green dwarfs will be in a mess. As someone who had personally entered Booty Bay, Zhang Cheng was very clear about the city's greatest weakness. That was the chaos of internal management. In order to extract more taxes, moneybags, river gas allowed adventurers, and even forest trolls to freely enter his city. He didn't know at all how great of a hidden danger this would pose to his safety. If an enemy launched a surprise attack from the inside, not only would these people not help maintain order, they would even take the opportunity to loot and vent their accumulated dissatisfaction with the goblin's greed. Damn it, you make it sound so easy. But the problem is, how do we enter the city? Don't tell me you plan on having us disguise ourselves as merchants or adventurers. The goblins aren't fools. They are very wary of outsiders. Old Phil complained in frustration. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly and explained, of course it's magical teleportation. As long as we set up a teleportation point close enough to Booty Bay, I can teleport 300 to 400 people in one go. I only need about 3 times to send all of the ogres in. I guarantee that when these fatties start rampaging in the city, River Gaz will not hesitate to summon all of his men to protect the bank. When the time comes, those battleships docked in the bay will be like ripe grapes on a shelf, waiting for you to pick them. Coordinating from the inside. My goodness, what a genius tactic. We'll do as you say. Old Phil's eyes shot out a terrifying light. He agreed to this bold and risky attack plan without hesitation. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful book mobile version website.com. Chapter 603. Without a doubt, for Azeroth, where teleportation technology was relatively mature and magic energy was particularly active, it was not too difficult to teleport troops across a large area. The only limitation was whether the mage was strong enough to trigger a strong resonance of energy and tear open a stable spatial passage. This was an important prerequisite for becoming a great mage recognized by the Kirintor Council. In other words, in the magic kingdom of Dalaran, anyone with the title of Great Mage could carry dozens or even hundreds of people and teleport accurately over a medium distance. Although Zhang Cheng had not received this title yet, in reality, his spellcasting ability had already surpassed the limits of ordinary mages, including the famous heroes like Khadgar, Ronin, Kael, that's Jaina, and so on. Perhaps only the last guardian Medivh, who had once been possessed by the Dark Titan, could truly surpass him in terms of magical knowledge and skills. After all, the clone cells of the Mind Flayer's brain gave him a computer-like memory, logical calculation, and abstract thinking ability. No matter how complicated the spell model was, as long as he saw it once, he could immediately copy it perfectly. Through reverse engineering, he could quickly understand the effects and principles of the spell. Even the legendary spells in the Faerun continent that were reputed to have the power to destroy heaven and earth were no exception. Coupled with the fact that divinity could freely convert different types of magic energy, he had the infinite mana that was often mentioned in the game. If necessary, Zhang Cheng could engage in a duel of spells that could last for days, months, or even years at any time with the enemy. It could be said that he alone was equivalent to a powerful strategic mage army, a true human nuclear bomb. Therefore, not to mention a mere 800 ogres, even if there were 8,000 or 80,000, as long as there was a stable coordinate, he could teleport them over in one go. Of course, to avoid frightening the Bloodsail pirates, he purposely kept the number low. But now, when the fully armed ogres had all arrived near the entrance of Booty Bay, he no longer hid his strength. He smirked and turned around to ask, "My loyal servants, are you ready to make a big scene?" "Of course. Great master. We can't wait to smash the enemy into meat paste," Mog Mullock replied with a ferocious expression. "That's right. Mager will smash the heads of those green dwarfs." Mark will burn them to death with fireballs. As violent creatures through and through, the ogres did not need any pre-battle mobilization. They immediately entered a state of excitement. If the orcs were described as violent and easily angered, then they would be a group of complete destruction maniacs. Once they went crazy, only death could stop them. Very good. Remember, you can kill people, you can destroy, but you can't mess up the city, understand? Because once the battle ends, this city will belong to me. After saying that, Zhang Cheng raised his right hand and tapped lightly in the air. In an instant, a blurry ball of light appeared out of thin air, and within a few seconds, it grew larger and clearer, finally forming a stable portal. Without any concealment, the goblin guards on the other side of the door undoubtedly noticed this strange object that had suddenly appeared. They carefully gathered around it. Seeing this scene, Zhang Cheng's face revealed a trace of playfulness. Without turning his head, he ordered, "What are you waiting for? Go quickly. The party has begun." "Understood." The Stonemer clan. "Attack!" Mog Mullock roared angrily, taking the lead and charging forward. He sent 2 goblin guards flying, opening the prelude to the Battle of Booty Bay. "Open fire! Open fire! Kill this monster!" The other goblin guards immediately let out ear-piercing screams, pulling the trigger without hesitation. Bang! 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 In the blink of an eye, the large-caliber guns produced by the goblins immediately shot out fatal bullets. Just as the guards were anticipating seeing this big fellow fall into a pool of blood, the thick layer of cuticle on the surface of Gorn's bloodline suddenly came into play. The bullets were all stuck no more than 2 centimeters under his hair. "Ah, bastard! You dare to injure me? Go to hell!" The intense pain made Mog Mullock even more irritable. He raised his fist and smashed the nearest goblin into a meat patty. He was so fast that the others around him could not react in time. What was even more terrifying was that even more ogres were pouring into this neutral city through the portal, slaughtering and destroying without restraint. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Booty Bay had descended into chaos, even though it was already very chaotic. Just as expected, the adventurers did not help the goblins defend against the ogres' attacks. Instead, they organized themselves and rushed to the bank, adding fuel to the fire that was not very optimistic to begin with. It was clear that for the daring adventurers, rather than risking their lives to fight against the ogres, it was better to take the opportunity to rob the rich man Rivergats. They did not care who ruled this city anyway. Moreover, after robbing a large sum of money, they could directly jump into the sea and escape. They could then find a place where no one knew them and live the rest of their lives comfortably. When Zhang Cheng was the last to pass through the portal, he could no longer recognize Booty Bay's original appearance. It was a complete mess everywhere. Although many goblins tried to escape, the narrow passage that was originally designed for defense had now become a huge obstacle. Coupled with their greedy nature, they did not forget to bring along all their valuables, even when they were escaping. This caused the path to be blocked before a dozen of them could escape. Apart from that, there were also some who chose to jump into the sea and swim. There were also many who sank and drowned because they had too many gold coins tied to their bodies. In any case, the scene looked like the first goblin death-seeking competition was being held. Zhang Cheng could not help but shake his head and sigh as he looked at these fellows who reaped what they sowed. They would rather die than give up their wealth? I really don't know if I should praise their perseverance or mock them for wanting money over their lives. Forget it, it doesn't matter. It's fine as long as we can take down this city. Just as he finished speaking, a battleship docked at the harbor suddenly raised its sails and turned its direction, aiming its cannons at the ogres wreaking havoc. The next second, boom, 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 boom. At least 12 large-caliber side cannons fired in unison. 6 or 7 ogres who could not dodge in time were smashed into meat patties on the spot. The scene was bloody and cruel beyond imagination. But just as the Blackwater pirates on this ship were preparing for the next round of fire, Old Phil's fleet finally circled around the beach to the south of Stranglethorn Vale. They quickly sailed into the bay and blocked off the U-shaped harbor. At the same time, they ordered an attack on the battleship that was attempting to resist. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 604. No, my city, my fleet, my bank. Seeing his only ship being sunk by the Bloodsail pirates, rich man Revagaz finally broke down. He covered his face and let out a hysterical roar. It was important to know that ships were luxurious in Azeroth, especially those with large caliber cannons. Even in the entire alliance, there weren't many of them. Each ship was worth tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of gold coins. For the goblins, who valued money as much as their lives, this was like cutting a piece of flesh from their hearts. In addition, the adventurers who had rushed into the bank and tried to blow up the vault also gave Revagaz a fatal blow. Boss, I don't think now is the time to think about the loss of property. Instead, we should retreat. A tall and strong Tauren standing next to him quickly reminded him. He was none other than another key figure in the Blackwater Pirates, the fleet commander, Carla Cape. Although it was a bit unbelievable for a Tauren to become a high-ranking pirate, in reality, almost all of the Blackwater Pirates' plans were made and executed by him personally. Therefore, whether it was wisdom or strength, he was quite outstanding. He was far from the kind and honest people of Thunder. No, I won't go. I can't give up my city and my bank vault. Carla, kill them for me. Kill all the invaders. I want to hang their bodies one by one on the mast to dry. Revagaz grabbed the other person's clothes and shook him with all his might. Unfortunately, with his little strength, not to mention shaking a tall and strong Tauren, even a normal human sailor would be a bit difficult. Carla Cape glanced at the rampaging fatties below and shook his head with a bitter smile. Sorry, boss. I can't do it. You should know how afraid the ogres are, especially with so many of them. Let's not talk about us. I'm afraid that even Stormwind City in the north would find it difficult to deal with this situation. We have to retreat immediately before we are completely surrounded, or else. Before he could finish his words, there was a loud bang downstairs. A two-headed ogre mage threw out a huge fireball and blew a big hole in the entrance of the inn. Then 3 or 4 ordinary ogres who had not taken the evolution potion rushed in and smashed the place. Some even grabbed the food on the table and stuffed it into their mouths. In the face of such overwhelming power, not to mention the short goblins, even the brave orcs fled in all directions. Awesome. Revelry. Mager likes revelry. Get out of the way, this is my wine. The two-headed ogre mage laughed maniacally as he squeezed his way into the pub. He snatched half a barrel of rum from his companion and drank it in one gulp. Idiot. Don't drink too much. Alcohol will affect my control over magic energy. The other head raised its arm and smashed the goblin pirate into a meat patty before it could escape, loudly protesting. Don't worry, our bodies aren't that weak. Shut up. Don't forget the master's order. If you don't die. Accompanied by the constant bickering of the two ogres, over 20 ogres quickly broke through the defense of the Blackwater Pirates and charged toward the tallest building in Booty Bay. Hearing the cries of despair from below, Carla Cape could not help but remind, Boss, let's retreat. Otherwise, we won't be able to leave. No, no, no. I will never give up on my city and wealth. I will die. I will also die while lying on the gold coins. Livagazzi's old habit of being unwilling to part with his wealth was clearly acting up again. His eyes shot out flames that could set Booty Bay ablaze. Don't think that he was putting on an act. He really did intend to take action. Dozens of tons of high explosives were buried under this building. They were originally prepared for guns and cannons, and a single fire would be enough to blow half the city to smithereens. After all, the main structure of Booty Bay was not made of sturdy bricks, but of wood and scrapped ships. It could not withstand the torment at all. Carla Cape was undoubtedly aware of this as well. He subconsciously shuddered and hurriedly dissuaded. Don't do anything foolish. As long as this city still exists, we will have a chance to take it back in the future. But if you blow it up, there will really be nothing left. Of course, he was not afraid of what would happen to Booty Bay. He was afraid that he would be blown into minced beef on the spot. Even though pirates were usually a group of desperados filled with the spirit of adventure, this did not mean that they were willing to throw away their lives casually, especially for a Tauren who had left his tribe. Just as Carla Cape was about to take advantage of the rich man Livigotzi's lack of attention to rush forward and snatch the dangerous button in his hand, the tightly shut door was suddenly slammed open with a bang. An exceptionally large one-eyed ogre rushed into the open-air balcony at the highest point of the city. He laughed sinisterly. Ha ha! A green-skinned dwarf and a little cow in a white shirt. Mogmarok was the first to discover the target. Master will reward me. Master? Damn it. Tell me, who is your master? Why did he join forces with the Bloodsail pirates to attack my city? Livigotzi, who was in a completely deranged state, did not care about the terrifying difference in strength between himself and the enemy. He jumped up on the spot and grabbed the thick fur on the chest of the huge creature in front of him. He looked like a little dog barking at a huge beast. Hee hee, you want to see Master? Don't worry, he will be here soon. Now, kneel down. Welcome the arrival of the great Master. And you little cow, if you dare to try to escape, I guarantee that you will be shot down by a fireball the moment you jump. Mogmarok cracked open his mouth and threatened fiercely. If he had not received a death order to capture the 2 core members of the Blackwater Pirates alive, he would have torn them to pieces the moment he rushed in. Damn it, if I had known earlier, I would have run first. Carla Cape noticed that there was a 2-headed ogre mage waiting for him below. He decisively chose to stay where he was. Perhaps in many people's impression, Taurens appeared as brave and fearless warriors. Even in the face of powerful enemies, they would face them without fear. However, who had been a pirate for several years, was clearly not in this category. To be precise, he was a complete anomaly, a Tauren who liked to use his brain more than his fists. Otherwise, he would not have been able to climb to the position of first mate and fleet commander of the Blackwater Pirates. At the same time, the adventurers who tried to blow up the vault to steal the treasures were defeated by over 30 ogres. Some were killed on the spot, while more chose to jump into the sea to escape. From the start of the battle to the end, in just over half an hour, Hidden Treasure Bay had completely lost its ability to resist. It was like a naked girl, completely exposed to the invaders, allowing them to trample on her. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful Book Mobile Version Website.com. Chapter 605. An hour later, Zhang Chung stood atop a large pile of gold coins in the vault of Booty Bay Bank. He smiled at the half-dazed old Phil. How is it, my dear friend? The wealth here didn't disappoint you, did it? Of course. Of course it didn't disappoint me. To be precise, I'm overjoyed by this harvest. You're really willing to let me take away 2/3 of it? Old Phil licked his lips, an expression of disbelief on his face. Before he entered the vault of the 3rd branch of the Hot Sand Financial Group, he only had a vague idea that the Blackwater Pirates, who were supported by the Goblin Financial Group, were very rich. But now he was completely shocked. Even if the Bloodsail Pirates were to sell everything they had, it would be impossible for them to obtain such a massive amount of gold coins piled into a small mountain. Moreover, he couldn't understand why the Blackwater Pirates didn't build a few more warships when they had so much money, completely driving their competitors out of Stranglethorn Vale. That's right. According to our previous agreement, 2/3 of this belongs to you. As long as you wish, you can take it all away at any time. As for the captured ships in the bay, you can also take away half of them. Zhang Chung casually grabbed a handful of gold coins and tossed it to the other human adjutant. Thank you for your generosity. The adjutant happily took off his hat after receiving it, imitating the noble etiquette of the coastal kingdom of Kul Tiras and bowing deeply. After all, this was the easiest battle he'd experienced since becoming a pirate, but it was also the battle with the greatest harvest. This was especially so for this vault made entirely out of metal. At a glance, it was filled with a dazzling golden radiance. Even the least greedy person couldn't help but feel thirsty and their heartbeat quicken. However, this couldn't be blamed on the Bloodsail Pirates being country bumpkins or lacking in imagination. In fact, One would never be able to imagine how wealthy these green-skinned dwarves were before they successfully looted a city that belonged to the goblins. The speed at which they plundered wealth was like a vacuum cleaner. In a short few decades, they could complete the initial accumulation of capital and enter the stage of capital expansion. If the Stormwind Kingdom had been willing to tear off their mask of justice and send an army to raid the southernmost part of Stranglethorn Vale, the tragedy of Edwin Van Cleef and the Queen's tragic deaths wouldn't have happened. The Western Wilderness wouldn't have deteriorated to the point where they had to form their own militia to protect themselves. Unfortunately, the theme of the adult world was always dark and cruel. Often, the more one insisted on being kind and righteous, the more miserable they would end up. They might even be misunderstood. This was the case for Illidan, who had once wanted to destroy the Burning Legion for the world of Azeroth. This was the case for Prince Arthas, who wanted to obtain the power to save his people from a plague. This was also the case for Varian Wrynn, who wanted to be a good king from the bottom of his heart. As for the goblins, who had taken advantage of the war to make a fortune, they had earned a large sum of money because of the battles. Hot Sand Financial Group, Rusty Water Financial Group, Venture Capital Corporation, one after another, the goblin forces that shone brilliantly in Azeroth were rising at an extremely fast rate. The only thing that was limiting their expansion was their powerful military force. In any case, Azeroth was a magic world where strength reigned supreme. Without a strong deterrent force, no matter how much money you made, it would be stolen by the enemy. In order to make up for this last shortcoming, the Rusty Water Financial Group was rapidly approaching the Horde camp, which lacked the concept of finance. It wouldn't be long before they completely joined the Horde camp and became a giant that controlled the entire Horde economy. The Venture Capital Corporation chose to hire experienced mercenaries and adventurers with high salaries to protect their businesses from being invaded. Finally, the Hot Sand Financial Group shouted the slogan of neutrality and secretly sold all kinds of weapons and goods. Even if the other party was an illegal organization like the Fedia Brotherhood, as long as they were willing to pay, they could buy what they wanted. It could be said that in the eyes of these green dwarfs, there was no such thing as good or evil. Even if the Lich King attacked and wanted to turn all life into undead, as long as it didn't affect their ability to make money, they would welcome it with open arms and provide some convenient services. Just as Zhang Cheng was rubbing his chin and thinking about how to deal with the mess in Chongbao Bay, Mog Murloc dragged two captives and staggered over. He said in a low, muffled voice, "Master, the captives you want, I'll bring them." "No, don't touch my gold coins. You damned blood-sale pirates. That's my property." Before the ogre finished speaking, Revagaz let out an ear-piercing scream. He was like a madman, directly pouncing on a sailor who was in charge of transporting the gold coins. He scratched and bit, his eyes bloodshot. "Damn it, let go, or I'll kill you." The young sailor angrily pulled out his scimitar and stared his bleeding wrist as he threatened loudly. "Mog Murloc, pull him away." Zhangqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he ordered. He finally understood that from a greedy point of view, all goblins were almost the same. "As you wish." The ogre didn't say anything else and directly came forward. He forcefully pried open Revagaz's bloody mouth, removed his wrist from the young sailor's hand, and threw him to the ground. Bang! Crash! With the sound of the gold coin mountain collapsing, this rich man immediately began to cry loudly. As he cried, he roared, "Ah! No! You damn bastards! You can't do this to me! I've painstakingly saved up all this money. Kill me! Hurry up and kill me!" This guy is the boss behind the scenes of Blackwater? The corner of old Phil's mouth twitched slightly. In his mind, he had always felt that someone who could fight the Bloodsail pirates to a stalemate should be an ambitious and ruthless character. But now it seemed that this wasn't the case. Instead, he seemed like a complete miser. Zhang Cheng smiled and shrugged his shoulders. "Don't mind it. Goblins are like this. In fact, if you snatch more than 10 gold coins from any goblin, I guarantee that they'll cry as miserably as a rich man. To goblins, money is time and life, and it's even more important than time and life." "Ha ha! All right, I was just thinking about whether to kill the leader of the Blackwater Pirates to eliminate the source of trouble, but now I've changed my mind. Perhaps letting him watch helplessly as the gold that belongs to him is snatched away bit by bit is the cruelest torture. Old Phil laughed heartily as he stroked the thick beard on his chin. Please believe me, this is the most terrifying punishment for a goblin who values money as much as his life. With that, Zhang Cheng walked over to Revigaz, who looked as if his father had died. He bent down and whispered into his ear, "If I were you, I'd immediately shut up and keep quiet, unless you don't want the secret safe in the third branch of the Hot Sand Consortium." Chapter 606. What? I don't understand what you mean. Revigaz suddenly stopped crying. His two small eyes showed unconcealable shock and fear. He couldn't understand how this secret, which only he knew, was known by an outsider. In order to protect the most valuable things, he didn't even tell his first mate, Carla Cape. Don't play dumb. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Zhang Cheng threatened meaningfully. Perhaps the natives of Azeroth didn't know why a rich man would build a stone statue of himself. But in the eyes of many players who like to explore the map, this was no secret at all. As long as you went through the entrance on the right hand of the statue, you would immediately see a mountain of gold coins and several treasure chests containing valuable items. Of course, in the game, these are just decorations, and textures. Players couldn't steal the huge wealth inside. But in reality, looking at Revigaz's nervous expression, it was obvious how amazing the treasure was buried inside. He didn't even care about the bloodsail sailors who were constantly moving the bank vault. Again, there was no harm without comparison. Perhaps the wealth stored in the Booty Bay bank vault was enough to match the total revenue of the Stormwind Kingdom for a few years. But compared to the secret safe, it wasn't even 1/10. Old Phil obviously didn't notice this. After he estimated that he had moved away almost 2/3 of the gold coins, he smiled and nodded at his partner, then walked straight in the direction of the dilapidated inn. Needless to say, he was going to buy the best wine in the cellar and return to the sea to celebrate this easy victory with the sailors. Because of the deterrent ogres walking up and down the street, he had a strong sense of crisis. The old pirate knew that if there was a fight on the ground, his men wouldn't be any better than the goblins who maintained law and order in Booty Bay. At most, they would be defeated in a few minutes. Although the distribution of the spoils was unusually smooth and there were no disputes or conflicts over benefits, he always had a strong sense of uneasiness and wanted to return to the familiar sea as soon as possible. After watching the Bloodsail pirates leave with the gold and wine, Zhang Cheng sat down and smiled at the goblin in front of him. "Revigaz, my dear friend, I think we should have a good talk. You see, you've lost your city and bank. You're actually bankrupt." "No, I'm not bankrupt. You damn bandit." As soon as he heard the word bankrupt, Revigaz immediately jumped up in anger like a little chick. Okay, you're not bankrupt. At least you still have the secret safe in the statue. But tell me, how are you going to stop me from taking it for myself?" Zhang Cheng smiled and continued to provoke the goblin's nerves. Revigaz angrily gasped and gritted his teeth as he asked, "You devils, tell me, what are you trying to do?" Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders. "You might not believe me, but I'm not interested in your pitiful little business and have no intention of plundering your wealth. As long as you're willing to sign a cooperation agreement with me, I can guarantee that you can keep the rest of your wealth and continue to be the ruler of Booty Bay. You're not in cahoots with the Bloodsail pirates." Revigaz seemed to have recovered a bit of his rationality, his eyes flashing with a sinister light. "In cahoots? No. Don't think of me as such a lowly person." Zhang Cheng shook his head with a sneer. "I'm only using the Bloodsail pirates' ships to cross the endless sea. After all, finding a stable teleportation point isn't an easy task. Only Dalaran, Stormwind City, Ironforge Castle, and Undercity have such places in the eastern continent. But the problem is that I'm bringing a large group of ogres with me, so it's not as easy to cause chaos and uproar by ship. Damn it, you're just trying to avoid chaos and uproar. You're working with the Bloodsail pirates to plunder my city and wealth?" Revigaz asked loudly with gritted teeth. "That's right. You should be glad that I only promised the Bloodsail pirates 2/3 of their wealth and made them promise not to destroy the main structure of the city, so there's still a portion of their wealth left. But whether or not I can keep it all depends on whether or not you're willing to cooperate with me. Zhang Cheng replied meaningfully. What do you want from me? To be able to become the boss behind the scenes of the Blackwater Pirates. Revigaz obviously wasn't an idiot. He knew that since this young human didn't take away the rest of his wealth, he must have a use for him. However, compared to becoming a penniless beggar, he would rather sell his soul to a demon. It's very simple. I need the Hot Sand Financial Group's business and transportation network throughout Azeroth. Help me collect some interesting things and conduct some small experiments while I'm at it. In return, I'll pay you enough gold, just like this. As the last word fell, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and lightly snapped his fingers. Instantly, a large amount of seawater gushed in from the outside, and in a matter of seconds, it was quickly converted into an endless rain of gold coins, drowning the green-skinned shorty in one fell swoop. The treasury, which was originally more than half empty, was suddenly stuffed to the brim. Revigaz struggled out of the pile of gold coins, picked up a piece, put it in his mouth, and took a bite. After confirming that the gold content was similar to the gold coins minted by the Hot Sand Consortium, he immediately shouted ecstatically, "My God, this must be a gift from the God of Wealth. Come on, give me more. Smash me to death with gold coins." Looking at the little goblin lying on the mountain of gold coins, Zhang Cheng immediately smiled and suggested, "How is it? I'm very sincere, right? Do you want to sign a cooperation agreement with me? I promise that you'll soon become the richest trading prince in all of Azeroth." Of course you're my friend. Don't even talk about an agreement. I'm willing to sign an agreement for 10,000 gold coins. From today onwards, you're my closest partner. No, not a partner. You're a god. You're my god. You're my faith. You're my everything. Revigaz knelt on the ground like a madman, frantically kissing Zhang Cheng's boots, looking like a fanatic. Because as a goblin, he was completely unable to resist the magic of gold, especially the ability to turn seawater everywhere into gold coins without any cost. It was simply a power that only the God of Wealth could have. Through the power of divinity, Zhang Cheng could clearly feel the little green-skinned dwarf in front of him, worshipping him devoutly.